Good afternoon, everyone. Good evening for those of you in the evening time zones. My name is SgtZdog. I have with me as a guest Sir Wagglepuss III. We are both moderators in the Battlestar Galactica Deadlock Discord server. Sir Wagglepuss III has won the last two tournaments for the game. Today we're going to be going over the Colonial Ships in detail. This is the second in a series of tutorial videos. Last time we went over kind of what makes a good fleet, how to build a good fleet, some examples of each one. I will provide a link to those up on YouTube here at the end of this one so that if you missed that last one, you can definitely go see it. We had lots of good content in that, so I think that'll be a great one to go back and look at. So, I just realized I don't have my windows laid out how I want them to. There we go. Let's lay that one there.
Smooth whilst you do that.
Yeah.
Hi, hello, yes, it is I, Sir Wagglepuss III. I am actually here. He hasn't introduced me for no reason.
Okay. So I figured, let's see. We're going to go to multiplayer. See, if I were really prepared here, I would have already set up fleets to show off all of these, but that's fine. This won't take long. So, I figured we would start for the Colonials with the Battlestars. Because, honestly, so much of the Colonial Fleet Doctrine revolves around them and the relationship other ships have to them. Oh, you can't quite fit one of each in. That's annoying. I was hoping you could fit one of each in, but you can't. Alright.
Ooh, ZDog?
Yeah?
Just check stream. I'm gonna black screen at the moment on the stream.
Oh, you know what? Haha, I know why. That's because I forgot to switch us over to this scene. Helps if I put it on the right scene.
Mm-hmm.
Um. Hmm. Hmm. Hello. Sources. Oh. Okay. All right. It OBS does this once in a while, where when you duplicate a scene, and then make changes to the duplicate, it will um, end up making changes to your.
OBS is a wonderful and curious creature.
Yeah. All right. So properties, window. Let's change this to this one, and I can't change the name of this here. There we go. Okay. Now everybody should be able to see the right thing.
Right, we can.
Let me just.
And now that we can see the correct thing, I'm gonna do your post in Discord because you forgot to.
Oh, I did, didn't I? Oh.
And you may also want to enable the fact that you're streaming on Discord as well. Have you done that before? I'm pretty sure you have.
I don't know what you mean.
Oh, on Discord you can set yourself as streaming, so if anyone sees your name on the right side of the Discord users, they can see that you're currently streaming Battlestar Galactica Deadlock, and just clicking on your name will give you a straight link to your Twitch stream.
Oh, really? Oh, I did not know you could do that. How do you do that?
If you go into your user settings, and then you go onto your... Where is it? Streamer mode. You can just enable streamer mode and it'll do everything. Just pop.
Yeah, I have that, but it'll drop a link to the Twitch stream?
No, but it will show that you're streaming on your user on the right, so you see where the
Oh,
moderators
okay.
are.
Gotcha.
So your icon will turn purple, and it will show that you're actually streaming.
Oh, well, I should be in streamer mode right now, because it says streamer mode is enabled. Yeah. I don't have it set to do anything else. All right. Back
now
to
that
the
the stream
task at
is actually
hand.
running, do you want to introduce this again for the benefit of the YouTube video?
Yeah, sure, why not? All right, my name is Sergeant
Take two.
ZDog. Yeah, that's right, take two. My name is Sergeant ZDog. Thank you everyone for joining us. This is part 2 in the tutorial videos on how best to play at Battlestar Galactica Deadlock multiplayer. I have joining me Sir Wagglepuss III. He has
Hi.
won 2 of the last 3 tournaments. We are both also moderators on the Battlestar Galactica Deadlock Discord server. So, today we are covering the ship specifics for the Colonials. Last time we covered what makes a good fleet, how to build good fleets, and that was a wonderful long. I think we went for a total of like 3.5 hours. I don't think this one will go that long. But I figured we would start with the battle stars because so much of Colonial ship usage for any other ship revolves around its relationship to the Battlestar. So, I have a fleet here drawn up with one of each of the first Jupiters. Do you want to throw up a fleet of the Minerva and the Artemis, and then we'll do a versus, and we can just run them into
Yeah,
each
can
other
do.
and
Give me
look at them?
Haha, now you catch me being unprepared. Wonderful.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Excellent.
And I'm gonna throw Arena. Oh, that took a surprisingly long time to reload the map. That's fine.
It has more to look through now.
All right, but this will give us like I'm brain farting 4 minutes around without having to actually do anything. So.
So, you want me to bring along a Artemis
Minervas.
and Minerva, correct?
Yep.
I can do that.
Minervas. Bring along the Minervas. I can't speak. Also, wolfing down the last of my mac and cheese with hot dogs in it. It's delicious.
Mm-hmm.
Mac and cheese with hot dogs, folks. Would recommend.
Food of the future.
Is it of the future? I mean, I feel like we've had boxed mac and cheese around for a long time.
It's of the future because it's all we're going to be able to afford to eat soon.
That's fair. That's fair.
I have brought along the requested battle stars.
Okay. Interesting non sequitur while this loads. So I have this FPS timer or meter down here, and I was doing some Diablo 3 with my fiance earlier today, and I noticed during the cutscenes it was getting up over 1,000. Really? Good luck. Have fun. Do we need luck for this?
Got it.
And I'm just gonna throw a Raptor at you just so I can ID you after we get done talking about these guys, these 2 ships. All right. So, and I'll even just hit end turn here. The first ship we got here. Well, let's talk about Battlestars in general. Battlestars for the Colonials are kind of your jack of all trades. They have a whole boatload of guns with 8 Battlestar artillery on the top of all 4 designs. They have generally pretty, decent or good armor, though we'll go into more of that later. They're most of the ships for Colonials that provide flak. Obviously, there's the Heracles now, which provides a flak bubble. But the Battlestars provide most of your flak. Even with the Heracles, and you'll still see Battlestars providing flak a far larger portion of the time. They always come with 2 fighters. The Jupiters also come with support squadrons. So they've got that going for them. And they all provide at least 1 munition slot, with Minerva providing 2. So they really do end up forming kind of the backbone of probably the majority of fleets. Uh, and I've flipped my script order here because in my script I have the Artemis first because we start with that one.
Smith.
But that's fine. We'll just go the opposite order I wrote my script in. So our Jupiter one here, obviously the ship that we were all really here to see when the game first came out. It's quite a bit better than it was when the game first came out. It's got 5 Battlestar Artillery. 6? Isn't it supposed to be 6?
It has 6 on the bottom.
There it is, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Battlestar Artillery on the bottom. Which I want to say when the game came out, it was only 4.
Yeah, it was only 4 on the bottom before.
But now it's 6, which means that unlike the Minerva and the Artemis, the Jupiter doesn't really care if a target's below it. It will just kind of like, okay, and shoot at you anything down below it as well, which is nice because the Jupiter is the slowest and least maneuverable of all 3 Battlestars, and so a lot of targets will get below it. The Jupiter also provides the largest flak bubble, which means it can provide the most flak protection for other ships, which is probably, in my opinion, its biggest standout feature. I don't know. What do you think of that, Waggle? Biggest single standout feature, the excessively large flak bubble, which is amazing.
The excessively large flak bubble on the Jupiter is amazing. Its other standout feature is the incredible durability of the ship. It is essentially a wall between your fleet and theirs. Everything about it makes it a wall. The durability that it has, the ridiculous flak bubble that it has, and the fact that it really doesn't care where the target is around it, it will be pointing a nice amount of guns at it.
Yeah. And I mean, so I'm trying to think. Prior to the Jupiter 2, the Jupiter 1 was the most durable ship, only beating out the Atlas because of its higher damage reduction, right?
Yeah.
Like the Atlas, I think, has more total armor and hit points, but loses out on the damage reduction based on in the engineering system, if I recall.
The Atlas has one facing, which has more armor than a Jupiter Mark 1.
Yeah, its top is 140.
Yeah, but otherwise, the Jupiter pretty much stands out with more durability on top of its damage reduction.
Yeah. Yeah, you can get to 30% damage reduction on the Jupiter 1 when you go to full defense, which that's enough to really start making a difference. Even at your neutral posture, you're still sitting at 25%, which when you're looking at, like Cylon guns, which are generally speaking already lighter weight than the Colonial guns, that makes a pretty big difference. Even if you go full attack, you're still sitting on 20%.
That's actually the biggest thing about the Battlestars in general, is because it's a common theme of the Battlestars, is that they all have enhanced damage reduction compared to the standard Colonial ships, which means that when you shift them into their offensive posture, they're still getting a tidy amount of damage reduction compared to what happens when the rest of the Colonial fleet goes into offensive posture. So you can still take some incoming fire and shrug it off, even though you're pumping everything into dishing it out. So you can feel less bad about it. And on that note, with defensive posture with Battlestars, there's 2 situations where, in general, for Battlestars, you may want to actually put them into defensive posture in the first place. The first is when you want to get the most out of your flak.
Yep, because that boosts your flak damage. Worth noting, because this is a common misconception, everyone. It does not increase or decrease based on posture the size of the flak bubble. That is constant based on the ship.
Yeah, what it does is think of it as affecting the density of the flak. The size doesn't get any bigger or smaller, it's just the amount that you put into that area. So essentially, if you go with the full defensive posture, you're improving your ability to completely wreck squadrons, is what you're doing.
Yeah, and I know you get some increased protection against missiles, but missiles, I mean, I've been on boost and still stopped, like, 98% of the missiles. So
Yeah,
like
because flak and missiles is just a straight up dice roll, and they're rolling that dice as they fly through the flak field.
yeah.
So it doesn't matter too much whether you put it on offensive or defensive.
Yeah.
If the missile's going to get through, it's going to get through.
I want to say it does still look at the posture, but it's you get so much starting just on that fail just on that first roll, like it almost doesn't matter. And with the Jupiter especially, its flak bubble is so huge. There's so many of those dice rolls. Like almost nothing can get through even when you're on boost thrusters. If you're looking at something like a Minerva that's already real beat up, then you might look at maybe boosting your flak just to stop missiles, but most of the time it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, so typically you'll boost your flak for dealing with squadrons that have got a little bit too enthusiastic for their own good.
Yeah.
The other reason that you'll want to boost into defensive posture is not during direct gun combat. Now, there's a little bit of a common thing in the community where they think that if you put one of your ships onto defensive posture, it's gonna somehow make your fleet last longer in a gunfight. Not quite. That's not how it works. There is a simple premise that dead ships don't shoot back.
Yep.
You want to focus all of your efforts on destroying enemy ships as quickly as possible. And an extra 10% damage reduction is usually not going to help you in a firefight.
Yeah. And it's
it will help
it's
you.
not even really a full 10% because it's like you're dropping the enemy from doing 80% to doing 70%, which means his damage is actually, well, I guess it's actually a little bit better because his damage will actually drop by 12.5% from what he was doing before. But like if he's got 8 guns, he still has the equivalent of 7 guns on you.
Yeah, you'll get a noticeable increase in your durability and your survivability, but it comes at the cost of one of your ships is no longer putting out any firepower. And on a Battlestar, that's a lot of firepower that you've just turned off.
Yeah,
so that situation where you do want to turn it on for durability's sake is if you're taking a munition salvo and your flak's not covering it.
Yeah, the other time I'll do it,
you want to flip the switch.
Pretty much the only time I will go into defensive posture in a gun engagement is when I'm so close I don't need that range and accuracy bonus. Like if you're already down to like the second to last bracket, even at full defensive, and you're a significant portion of your damage is your squadrons and stuff, and like that one ship is not a huge portion of your damage, then I'll go ahead and turn it down to defensive. Or if you've got a ship that's so beat up, and putting it in defensive will give it the time to complete a turn to bring a new armor facing into bear.
Yeah.
There's some edge cases like that where I'll do it, but otherwise, yeah, stick to the offensive.
My one exception to that with range and swapping posture is where Battlestar Artillery is concerned, because it has horrific accuracy.
It does.
The flip side is that it's throwing out 6 damage per shot, and it's hitting like a sledgehammer. But it has horrific accuracy, and if you go from +4 to -4, it's still a kick in the teeth, even when you're at close range. So you have to weigh very carefully how much you want that extra 10% durability, or 12.5%, compared to having as much accuracy as possible.
Yeah. So, for example, to really underline this fact, with the ship on full attack, the close range bracket for the Battlestar Artillery hits, what is that, about 2,500 meters on a Jupiter. Whereas
it's not far off that.
It's only, you're dropping it down to 2,000 meters, so just 2 kilometers at full defensive. So if you're in the situation where you're gonna be in that close range bracket anyway, it might be worth it. But if it's a case of you're gonna lose a range bracket, on top of the accuracy bonus or penalty affected by just switching your fire control on or off, like take the extra accuracy because you're going 88% to 112% turret accuracy, even without looking at your range brackets. So you're increasing the number of hits by a quarter. You're going from having 4 guns to 5 guns in equivalent.
I hate the quiet before the first shot.
Daka 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 daka.
Daka, daka, daka.
IFS have come back hostile.
There we go. Now we can see you.
And just for the record, with Battlestars, there's also a common community thing where people like to say, point defense guns are really good against squadrons, and they will chop them up on the approach. As you can see here, there is a Raptor squadron that is sat there and took a grand total of 2 damage from 2 Battlestars that have fired at max range.
I just set this
PDCs on max
Raptor
offensive
to attack the Artemis, and go ahead and try and kill that Raptor, and we'll look at just how long it takes you.
So I've already started trying to kill you. I already had +4 posture and focus
On the
fire
last turn.
before you even got into range.
Now you didn't have Dreadus last turn, correct?
I got it for the last quarter or so. That's
Okay.
probably started actually.
So you've
doing
got it
something.
now. So this whole next turn, you'll have Dreadus lock, and that's of course a huge reason why you didn't do as much damage, of course, because way out on the edge of the range, no Dreadus lock. That's a really hard target to hit.
Yeah, it's a general theme for people not having Dreadus lock on a target imparts a massive accuracy penalty.
Yeah. And that's actually something that let's mention real quick. I wanted to go back to this more when we get to the Mana Core, but for the Colonials, all of their size 4 ships, I looked at this to make sure, all of the size 4 ships only have 4,000 meter Dreadus range. So that's the Minerva, the 2 Jupiter classes, or refit versions, and the Atlas. All 4 of those ships only have a 4,000 meter Dreadus range. It also includes the Janus. The Janus is actually only size 3. The Artemis actually doesn't have that penalty. It's only a size 3 ship, and it still has the 5 kilometer Dreadus range.
That is because the Artemis is the most cost-efficient ship in the game, and the Artemis is Bay.
Yeah.
But we'll get to that later.
Yep. So yeah, while we're talking about the 2 Jupiters here, we can kind of keep an eye on how long it takes the Minerva and the Artemis to bring down the Raptor. And this is bearing in mind, we'll get into this more in a moment, the Minerva has 11 PDCs instead of the usual 8 that's on the other 3 Battlestars, as well as gunship stat bonuses. It has bonus, I know it has bonus range. Do you want to, on your next turn, range. You can look and see. Yeah. It doesn't have bonus accuracy as well?
Off the top of my head, I'm not sure about the accuracy, but I can check that next turn. I can tell you with certainty that it does have the extended range.
Yeah. Actually,
so now that I've actually got a Dreadus lock, I'm starting to do
you actually
damage.
Got it all the way down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You
so
had to
look
get
and
awfully
see.
close for me to do that. If you skirt at max range, you'll do nothing with PDCs.
Yeah.
With a range that PDCs start to do damage, you was getting into my second range bracket. That's when the health started to plummet.
Yeah.
At that point, you can just turn flak on.
Yeah. That's one of the reasons PDCs are so lackluster. And also, of course, one of the big reasons you want to always strike from directly above or below your targets, especially when shooting at Jupiters. I mean, with everything else, it's kind of, maybe it doesn't matter as much. But with Battlestars, Jupiters especially because their flak bubbles are so large, but the Battlestars especially, just because you'll come around to the side, you'll get into that flak area, and your opponent will just kick on the flak, and you'll just get your squadrons decimated. I've had this come up a couple of times on stream. It's very real.
Also, the Minerva does not get the turret accuracy bonuses.
Just a range bonus, okay.
Only the range.
Yeah. But of course, it does get the 3 extra PDCs. Folks, as we were just talking about there, though, like, feel free. You can use your PDCs when your opponent gets his fighters in real close. But outside of these first two range brackets, they just don't do much damage. When did this show up? This showed up, I think, 2 weekends ago, so about a week and a half ago. I was doing a match against, I don't remember who it was right now, but he brought, a nice, the more or less balanced Cylon fleet, 2 Argus, whatever. Managed to win the fighter battle against mine, and I was trying to use my battle stars with their PDCs to at least shoot down the war drivers and stuff. And because it spent so much time outside of those 2 innermost range brackets, it just didn't do much. So, yeah, don't rely on your PDCs to do squadron damage. Light and medium guns. We'll get into those in a moment.
So an extra note with Jupiters, because I want to focus on Jupiters just for the moment. Positioning for them, you want them to be at the front of your fleet so that they can provide the flak protection, and ideally you want to position them so that they are the first ship to take incoming fire. If you have a fleet that's got a Jupiter in it, and it's got a bunch of Adamants and Berserks or Rangers and the such, and they're getting shot at first, the Jupiter is not doing its job correctly. The fleet is not being positioned correctly.
Yeah. Well, especially with like Berserks, because they have the extended range. They don't even need to be as close.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Jupiter has so much armor, and really compared to pretty much everything else in the Colonial fleet, other than maybe like the Atlas and the Manticore, probably has the fewest guns per point. Like, even as impressive as its artillery is, you probably get more bang for your point. Maybe the Adamant too, just because the Adamant Jupiter lights. But
you're very much going for a defensive playstyle with the fleet. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're trying to hang back and not engage the enemy. It means that you're trying to be protective of your fleet assets rather than throw absolutely everything down the enemy's throat.
Yeah.
The Jupiter, if you want to field it, it tends to be happy with other ships that are around the same speed of it. Throwing it with things like the Janus, the Atlas. Ships like that go really well with the Jupiter, because when you bring a Jupiter, you are slowing your entire fleet's speed and dive rate down to that Jupiter, because that Jupiter is a source of your flak. If you try to have your faster fleet elements dive faster than it, you're losing your flak protection by doing it. Which means that if the enemy has got any kind of real munitions, they're going to wreck you for that.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons I use a Jupiter to accompany my Atlas, because the Jupiter is, the Atlas is slower than everything else, even the Jupiter, though not much. So the Jupiter is a nice accompaniment to an Atlas, just because it gives you the same squadron count, you get that munition usage, and it provides the flak protection for your Atlas. So you don't have to devote a sweeper or Vipers to shooting down missiles. Let's see, I think that's pretty much everything. So when actually using the Jupiter, because it's such a balanced ship overall, when we're talking about like one-on-one engagements, like playing a balanced fleet, the Jupiter is going to want to rush in when it can outgun the enemy. It's going to want to hang back when you can just use your 3 squadrons and munition to pepper the enemy from range. So when trying to figure out what its role is, it's pretty much the same as the balanced fleet, but on a single ship. Pick the enemy off from range. And this actually kind of applies to the campaign too. It is cheaper to replace your squadrons than it is to repair the ship. Sorry, pilots, but you are replaceable compared to the armor plating on this Jupiter.
Also, bear in mind that whilst the Jupiter is armored like a brick, it's not invulnerable.
Yeah.
If the enemy brings along 3 Minotaurs or 3 Revenants and decides that ships have got to die, the Jupiter is going to die to sustained fire.
Yeah. It will take longer to die,
take
but it will die.
Less than something else. Or if someone brings enough firepower, enough battle stars, or enough revenants and munition focus, you can absolutely one-turn a Jupiter.
Yeah.
So just because you've got all of that durability doesn't mean that the ship is invulnerable. You've still got to play smart. You can't just throw it into the fray. You can't just, have faith that it's not going to die at the things that are going to shoot at it. It's still going to get roughed up.
Yeah. Let's see, what else do I have? What else have we not covered? Let's see.
Preferred munitions on it, by the way. And this is
my
concept
taste
that
is
applies
for usually like a PCM.
Yeah, for most of the battle stars, the Minerva being probably the one exception to this. For most of the battle stars, support munitions work wonders on a battle star. PCMs, debris mines in general, work really nicely on a battle star because you can throw them out whilst your flak field's up. You can throw them up, down, in front, behind, sort of thing, and you won't throw them into your own flak field. So the support munitions are great on a battle star. The offensive-based ones, like guided munitions, torpedoes, etc., you can do it if you want, but bear in mind that to use them, you've got to drop your flak.
Yeah.
Because if you don't drop your flak, you just shoot into your own flak and waste your munitions and look like a bit of a tool, and no one wants that.
Yeah. And that's pretty much my thing is, it's not really worth dropping the flak most of the time. You get so much firepower out of the guns. The single munition slot doesn't add a whole lot to the Jupiter. So, in the Jupiter, it doesn't have any real weaknesses below, so it doesn't need an offensive munition to help make up for that, like say the Artemis might. I really like the PCMs just because, as massive as that flak bubble is, it lets you cover some awkward angles. You could, if you wanted, throw like a debris mine, if your squadrons are outnumbered or whatever, but I tend to find that's not necessarily my problem.
Whilst it's not a problem, debris mines on a battle star can be extremely nasty because they're spending all the time trying to stay away from the flak field.
Right.
It can be very unexpected and very inconvenient to suddenly have a debris mine appear in that nice exposed top area where you're about to dive in for the fire control system, and oh god, why is debris flying at me?
Yeah. So, yeah. Regarding squadrons, pretty much always want to get Viper 2s on a Jupiter. You could go for something else in your fighter slots, but I think you're pretty much, if you can afford the Viper 2s, get the Viper 2s.
The one exception to this would be if you are running Taipans.
Yeah. I'm not convinced on dropping fighters for Taipans unless you're running like a pure carrier fleet, in which case I could see, if you've brought along a Jupiter to provide some flak for your Atlases, maybe put the Taipans on the Jupiter just because you want the Vipers to have the best evasion possible, and so you would want those on the Atlas, and then you can put the Taipans on your Jupiter.
It's also worth noting that Battlestars are one of the prime candidates for putting squadrons that you may not that you don't want to take up priority slots. If you're running lower point cost fleets, you're not running Jupiters and you don't have the exclusive support slots, but you want to bring along sweepers or ARPs, and you've got stuff like Atlas, and you've got stuff like Damants and Berserks, well, Berserks in particular, but you've also got like an Artemis or two or a Minerva or two in there. Those squadron slots are my usual go-tos if I want to pop a sweeper or an ARP or a Raptor into the fleet, because they've just got the base 20 evasion. Whereas I will leave stuff like the Berserk and the Atlas for the actual Viper slots. Taipans, I'm a bit here and there. I'm not a big user of them. I've heard and seen that they can be pretty effective if you run them with ARPs to increase their accuracy, but your mileage may vary.
Yeah, I've found my experience has been that because your Dratus range isn't significantly greater than the target painting range or the gun range of the Taipans, it's really hard to be able to set it up so that you can get the laser pointing from the ARPs on the same turn that you do the charge in with the Taipans, which is the big thing that would give them the advantage. And so I did this experiment where with Garfield where we just ran an equal number of Vipers and Taipans with ARPs supporting both, and the Vipers shredded both. Whether I did small scale or large scale, the Vipers beat it out handily. Simply because, if nothing else, just like shoot the War Driver first, shoot the ARP first, and the Taipan's accuracy drops way down. And then you go shoot the Taipans. So, yeah, I mean...
Although this is very much starting to go on to squadron dynamics and how that all works, that's a whole concept in and of itself.
Yeah.
How to handle squadron fights, the battles, what matches up against what. Whereas the Battlestar use itself, just know that for the squadrons, the fighter slots, you'll generally want Vipers to be running in there. If you're going to put Taipans on anything, and you don't want Evasion, Battlestars are a fairly decent slot for it. They're not the worst pick. Munition-wise, on your Jupiters especially, they'll want the supporting munitions, as they're being what they are and what they do, their flak is going to be on a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Whereas stuff like the Artemis and the Minerva, they have very different playstyles to the Jupiters, which we'll go on to in a moment. So they can get away with different munitions, the Minerva especially.
Yes.
But unless there's anything else that you want to say on the Jupiters. Because honestly, between the Mark 1 and the Mark 2, you can make all of the points about the Mark 1 about the Mark 2 and just say, it's also got more hull and armor, it's got an extra squadron slot, and it's got a ton more guns.
So the only other things I really want to mention real quick here is, when using Battlestars, don't launch flak and then launch a squadron into your flak. Like, we all do it plenty of times, but do be careful not to do that. Whereas the support squadron, because they actually use the runways in the flight pods, you can actually launch and retrieve them while flak is up. So feel free to do that. Regarding support squadrons on Jupiters, really all of them are options. It depends on what your fleet can benefit from. Sweepers to protect ships that aren't...
Sweepers are nice if you want to run a separate detachment from your fleet.
Yeah.
If you want to run something like a couple of Adamants or a couple of Berserks, and you want them to split off from the main fleet, having a sweeper allows you to do that, and you've got the support squadron to do it without cutting into your Viper loadout.
Yeah. They're also good if you're not going to win the fighter battle anyway, and you know the enemy is going to be like having, say, ARPs come and strike you, or Vespid bombers. You can throw the chaff directly on top of your ship and protect yourself from those munitions. So it is still useful for like covering awkward angles in the same way you would use a PCM. You can use the chaff from sweepers. Raptors are a great option still. Like Raptors are not like Viper ones where you're like, oh, it's just the free squadron. Feel free to use them. They're good options.
Raptors are pretty good.
Because they're high speed. They're faster than the ARPs. They're not as fast as your Viper 2s, but they have the extended radius range. So that's pretty awesome. The rockets do 16 points of damage if you get all 4 rockets in a salvo to hit.
Yeah, they've got a nasty little bit of punch if you actually make it hit.
For comparison, 4 guided missiles is 24 damage. So you're 10 points less than a whole stack of guided missiles, and the Raptors can dock and reload indefinitely. So, feel free to use those Raptor rockets. The boarding is solid against everything, Cylons especially, with the minus processing power. But yeah, don't feel bad about any of the 3 support squadron choices in your Jupiter. They're all good. Regarding Jupiter 2, even more than the Jupiter 1, you don't care if targets are below you because now you have the full 8 guns on bottom as opposed and not just the 6 that the Jupiter 1 has. So even more, you don't care if targets are below you.
Target acquisition maintained.
If at all possible, if you're gonna pay for the Jupiter 2, try and if it's possible and you don't need the flag, charge straight at your target. Take advantage of the additional 4 additional guns you have on the front for 6 total on front. That lets you bring 14 Battlestar artillery onto a single target from one ship. That's impressive. I know against a lot of the base stars, if you actually go broadside, you can get top and bottom guns going. But against any of the smaller targets, you can still get 14 guns on with the Jupiter 2. It does give 2 support squadrons, which is a nice little bonus for the number of points you're paying. But other than that, I mean, it's more durable. I don't know. There's not really much else to say about the Jupiter 2. It is the one that's more closely designed after the show Battlestar Galactica, after the show Jupiter. So it's got that going for it.
The Jupiter Mark II is essentially a case of what if the Jupiter Mark I, but more.
Yeah, very much. It's got 15 more hull, 20 points on every armor surface except rear, I think. Oh no,
no, rear gets it as well. It's a
top and bottom only get 10. Yeah. So yeah, 20 extra armor everywhere. Adds up to a good bit. Makes it that much easier to turn and present a different armor facing. But it is one of those cases, just because the Jupiter ends up getting used for its flak so much, quite often the Jupiter 1 is the better buy than the Jupiter 2. Save yourself the points. You're not going to get that. You're only going to end up with the 2 extra bottom guns in practice. 1 support squadron, not as good as the nearly berserk difference you're paying, where you could have gotten a whole fighter.
There are fleet builds that can work with the Jupiter Mark II. But if you're just looking for an armoured centerpiece that's going to give you a massive flak bubble, and that's all you really want from your Battlestar, you'll generally want a Jupiter. If you want a ship that can actually consider going nose first into an enemy fleet, and it's got the guns and the durability with the turn-off to do that, with supporting gun elements like a Minotaur or 2 to really beef it up, the Mark II can do that. But it still has a fairly defensive playstyle to it. It just gets a few more options at a much larger point cost. Quite honestly, between the Jupiter Mark I and the Jupiter Mark II, it becomes a case of preference in how you want to build your fleet, rather than distinguish roles, as they're filling a fairly similar thing.
Yeah.
A bonus note on the Mark II, actually, is because of the way that the guns are laid out and the way that the ship is laid out, a lot of the guns on the Jupiter Mark I on the ventral section have got some awkward angles with how they're buried into the hull.
They very do. He's referring to these Mark III bottom ones.
The Mark II doesn't really have that problem, and its top-mounted guns have got very clean line of sights to the side. You can broadside with the Jupiter Mark II and bring 16 Battlestar artillery onto a single large target that's about base star grade.
Yeah.
So if you get into range with the Mark II and you're level with it, and you haven't been diving or climbing, you can deal some serious pain.
Yeah, I feel like it's pretty much just against the base star, the Argos, and the Kratos. You might be able to pull it off against like another Jupiter or something, but it's pretty much just going to be those 3 where you can bring all 16 artillery in. But considering all 3 of those have really deadly missiles, like that's still, that's not exactly a bad thing.
Do you have any last notes on the Jupiter?
No, I don't think so. I think that pretty much covers it.
The very last one that I'll say about the Jupiter, which this goes quite a bit for it, is protect your ass.
Yes.
If you get into a firefight and you need to turn your armor, turn into the enemy fleet.
Yep. 140 front versus 80 rear.
The big problem with that is if you turn your ass away with a Jupiter and they crunch through your rear armor, they're going to start dealing damage to your navigation. you will no longer be able to turn efficiently. You won't be able to get any more distance, and the Jupiter becomes a sitting duck.
Yeah, and I mean, at 80 rear, that's your softest target. You're gonna end up wasting so much armor facing on the other surfaces if it dies with just the rear and one other side shot out. So yeah, you definitely want to turn into the target.
Yeah, because if you play a
It's
Jupiter
probably
Mark
even
II,
worth
right,
risking it, even if your front's already shot out. Like just use if the enemy doesn't have too many guns, and it can survive on its massive 180 hull, keep the rear navigation going. Let your armory get shot out. That's kind of be a little more situational, but
because the Jupiter's got the mobility to make the turns. Between the left, right, and front, you've got 420 points worth of armor that you can bleed through and use as an absolute brick wall. If you turn out your rear armor and you get your navigation disabled, that's it.
yeah.
And if your navigation gets disabled anyway, the Jupiter is screwed. Because things like the Revenant, the Arachne, the Minotaur, the Heracles, they're going to sit at max range, and they will just laugh at the fact that you can no longer move, and they'll take to pieces without taking a single shot of return fire.
Yep.
Even though it's such a slow ship, it, weirdly enough, lives and breathes on its mobility.
Yeah.
If it can't keep moving, it will die.
Well, and I mean, like, even if they get in range, even if they just sit at the edge of your range, with their lighter guns being so much more accurate, Battlestar Artillery hitting anything below size 3, so any of the size 2 ships, and honestly, even the size 3 ships, it's quite a bit harder to get reliable hits at that outer range bracket. So, yeah, don't let your rear get shot out. It's painful. Let's talk about the Artemis.
The Artemis.
The Artie Babe.
Oh, yes.
It's such a good looking ship. I don't think I ever really noticed the windows out on the front, the bridge decks or whatever. Oh, those are nice.
Aesthetically, it is basically a case of if someone took the original Galactica model from the original series and thought, what if that but modern?
Yeah.
That is the Artemis. And it is a very, very nice looking ship for it.
Yep. So, key perks. Despite its comparatively low cost, it still has 8 Battlestar Artillery on top, which is awesome. It's a significant amount of firepower. You still get 2 fighters, which is pretty good. And you still get the munition slot. And this thing is fast. Like, pretty much the only stuff that can really outrun it is the stuff that doesn't pose a threat to it if it catches up. Anything this can catch, it poses a significant threat to. Even a Jupiter, just because the Artemis still has the same offensive loadout. So it also has, the second biggest flak. I think the Heracles is just a little bit smaller than the Artemis flak. I haven't looked real close. I don't know. I'm looking at my Battlestar Artillery in the background, trying to take shots at your Vipers there, and just so many of the shots are just missing. Like they've been shooting the Battlestar Artillery at your squadrons there for a while, and I've got one of them down to 34.
It's like, yeah, bless them, they've been trying.
Hard.
What you get for the Artemis is for 1,550 points, you get 2 squadrons, you get a munition hardpoint, you get pretty sturdy durability.
Yeah.
All of its armor hardpoints, its main ones, its left, right, and front are 80 hit points, and it's got 70 on its top and bottom, and it's got 120 hull to boot. The ship is sturdy for a 1.5k point ship.
Yeah, this is basically if you marry 2 adamants and then add some guns and flak.
It's got an adamant strapped to each side of it in its PDCs, because 8 PDCs is about the same kind of DPS output that you get from a single adamant, and you've got one of those strapped to either side of you. through its PDCs. It's got its 8 times of Battlestar artillery on top, so it is a tried and true capital killer, if you can get those on point. And it's got the mobility to get those Battlestar artillery on target to anything that matters. Like, the only thing that the Artemis has to actively look out for and be wary of in a gunfight is the Revenant and Minotaur.
Yep.
Everything else it is capable of outdiving and getting its Battlestar artillery onto and dealing significant damage back to it.
In fact, actually, while we're on that, on this turn here, I'm going to go ahead and hit end turn. Take a hard right turn or a hard left turn and like do the maximum yaw just so we can show off how much roll you get out of this thing, because that's one of the things, like, Revenants will outdive this, but unless you give them a lot of time to do it, they still won't be able to get low enough to avoid the Battlestar artillery.
Oh, yeah, that's a fairly good Battlestar concept to roll with, by the way, is the idea of deliberately rolling your ships.
Yeah.
Now, my Artemis is about to make a very significant hard right turn. In fact, the Minerva's going to make a pretty hard turn as well. But
Yeah,
I'm
careful
just
not to
doing it
collide
so
them.
I don't open fire on you.
That's fine, I don't really care. I don't think at this range you're going to kill those Jupiters in one turn.
I would be very surprised and impressed. But anyway, so here we go.
In fact, I don't think you have the rate of fire to do it.
So the amount of turn that you are getting off that is the hardest turn that you can pull on an Artemis. And the amount of distance that it has covered in that turn, you can straight up flip your entire armor on an Artemis.
Yeah, because, I mean, you've pulled like a 110-degree turn there in terms of armor facings. Obviously, your heading hasn't changed by that much. But in terms of armor facings, that was like 110 degrees. So you can easily bring yourself out of one arc and into the other. And then complete that turn to, bring your front out of exposure. So you can protect your armory. But yeah, this is what I wanted to look at here. You're tilted, what is that? That's like a 15, 20 degree tilt, which once you consider a target is, a few kilometers out, they can be a decent bit below you, and you'll still be able to bring your Battlestar artillery onto target. So the real problem, of course, when dealing with like Revenants or Arachnes is quite often they've got an Argos supporting them shooting missiles down from above, and blocking the missiles is usually the bigger threat. But if your opponent doesn't have something you need to climb for, definitely dive with the Artemis, because you have two heavy guns on the bottom.
Yeah, the one glaring weakness of the Artemis is that its ventral armament is awful.
Which is better than it had 0 or 1 when the game launched?
Oh no, the Artemis is one of the few ships where its armament has not actually changed at all throughout the entire
Oh, is it
course
not?
of the game.
Oh, I thought it got more guns on bottom as well.
No, it got a passive buff from when the heavy guns got better.
Oh, okay.
But its armament's not actually changed. It has always had 2 front heavies and 2 ventral heavies.
Yeah.
The best case scenario for an Artemis, if a target gets under it, is pointing towards the target and getting 4 heavy guns on it, or being side onto the target and having 2 heavy guns and it's 8 PDCs.
Yep.
Either way, that is not the prettiest of pictures when you could be running 8 Battlestar artillery and your 8 PDCs on a target.
So very much the Artemis, more important than any other ship, use that mobility to try and stay below the target. Obviously, you don't want to go so far below that they're able to shoot out your top armor, because that's where your fire control is, and then you don't have any guns. But you've got 80 left and right. You've got 80 front for making the turn. So stay below your target. Use all your armor faces. Let that 8 Battlestar artillery do its work.
In fact, about how I've dove now, relative to the Jupiter Mach II, is a pretty happy place.
Yeah.
Where you want to be.
And if you got, and if you get too close, you'd even want to come up a little, because of course your ship will roll as we circle. But even then, I don't even know that you'd want to do it a lot, because of course letting a few hits hit your top armor is not the end of the world, as long as it doesn't punch through. So, yeah, that is a pretty good height difference. That weakness of the ventral guns is one of the reasons I would still consider putting an offensive munition onto the Artemis, especially because just for the points, you can handily get enough munitions between it and the other ships to have a sizable munition strike.
Yeah, the Artemis can definitely be a lot more flexible with its loadout because of its comparatively lower point cost. If you bring a Jupiter, you're basically committing to the Battlestar playstyle. If you bring a Jupiter along, because it is your main focus of protection, it's the centerpiece of your fleet. Everything's got to go as slow as it. The Artemis is much more flexible in its approach. If you want to bring a bit more of a defensive fleet, the Artemis is sturdy enough to bulk that up. If you want to bring an aggressive fleet that wants to do quick maneuvers, it wants to try and flank things, it wants to try and split up, it wants to try and get in people's faces, the Artemis has got the speed to do that. So the munition that you bring along can be custom tailored according to what you want the fleet to actually do and what you want the Artemis's job to be in there.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the Jupiter is generally shoehorned in the I am big defensive brick, thank you for playing.
Yep. So I think that pretty much covers it for the Artemis. You know, like with all the other Battlestars, you know, if you can outgun the enemy, feel free to charge in. If you can't, stay back. Let your squadrons and munition slot do the work. On to the Minerva.
For the love of Christ, don't let enemy gunships get under your Artemis.
Yes.
If enemy gunships look like they're going to get underneath your Artemis, get away from them.
The Atlas will outgun the Artemis from below. If an Atlas gets below you, it will outgun you. So,
but with how fast the Artemis is,
an Atlas shouldn't.
You should not be letting anything but a Revenant get below you.
Arachnes,
Revenant or
yeah,
Minotaur should not be getting below you. The Arachne has got more or less an equal dive speed.
Does it? Oh, I thought it dived faster than the Revenant.
So if both of them start diving from turn 1, you'll be about equal and
be able to roll for the rest.
The Arachne will lose that fight hard.
Yeah. Yeah, it's 2 heavies, 2 mediums, 4 mediums, something like that. No, 3 heavies, 2 mediums?
It's got 5 mediums.
5 mediums, okay.
It's 2 front and 3 top.
So, yeah.
General playstyle with the Artemis. If you don't know what you're up against, dive until you do.
Yeah. If you see enemy ships up high, keep an eye on them, because quite often enemy ships that are high are missile ships, but even then, you know, if you're not sure, dive first turn. You can always go back to climbing later. Alright, so the Minerva. I love the runway lighting on the Minerva.
The Minerva is such a weird ship.
It is. Like, it is the weird ball of the Battlestars. I'm kind of glad we ended up covering it last.
Like, it's just such a strange application with this ship because it is a Battlestar, which the main premise of the Battlestars is that they can take a hit. The Minerva is made of paper.
It is. Sorry, I'm getting distracted.
If you look at its stats, you look at its armor and hull, it's actually got 60 on everything but rear and top, where it's got 45, and it's got 135 hull. And yet the ship still feels like it's made of paper, even though technically, at just about any given angle, it actually has the same durability as an Artemis.
Yes. And I want to say its damage reduction is even higher. Or is it lower? I don't remember.
It does have slightly lower damage reduction than the
It is lower? Okay.
The other ones have 25% damage reduction. The Minerva has 22% damage reduction as base.
So let's start with the things that it has in common. Has the same 8 Battlestar artillery on top, which is great. Um, like the Artemis, not as much firepower below. It is doing better. I want to say you get, I see 5, 2 on each flight pod, 1 in the center. So 5 heavy guns on bottom.
Yep.
Its front artillery has been upgraded to 2 Battlestar artillery up from the 2 heavy guns of the Artemis. Now, this one is one of 2 Colonial ships that have rear guns. It has 2 medium guns sitting on the back of each flight pod for 4 medium guns on back, which is honestly not the worst feature of it. I feel like it's probably a feature we underplay just because it only has 45 rear armor. 4 medium guns, though, is pretty good, especially when we consider its pseudo high speed and extended range.
It's more or less got a berserk strapped to its ass.
Yeah. That's actually really accurate when one considers the thin armor and the thin armor of a berserk.
Right.
The downside and why I would not say try and use that, folks, is only 45 rear armor. The rear is so big that even when you're, broadside on, the rear armor will still take a few hits. So it's almost never in real great shape to begin with. And like the Jupiter, once it gets shot out, you're a sitting duck.
Yeah, with a Minerva, you generally just don't want to get shot at in the first place.
Yeah. Very much use the extended range. I think it hits the full 5,500 base at range.
So its base range is because I'm having to go through the turrets and stuff. It's without any posture, it's 5,250.
Oh, 5,250. So it's not even the full 5,500.
Well, you say that, but the Artemis without any
is 5,000.
Yeah, it's 5,000.
Yeah.
So when you go full posture with the Minerva, it gets 6,100. So
just barely longer range than Cylons, so you won't be outranged by Cylons anymore.
The Minerva can actually outrange Cylons. In actual practice, being a Battlestar, it generally won't get the chance to outrange many Cylon ships, because all of the Cylon gunships are also extremely maneuverable, with the notable exception of the Kratos.
Yeah. Even that, though, is not going to be doing too bad compared to the Minerva.
Yeah, and with the way that the ship is actually laid out, that starts getting a bit squiffy. But against Colonial players, the Minerva actually shines as a gunship.
Yep.
If you're trying to play the range game specifically, the Minerva starts to shine. Because in this matchup here, if I can keep his squadrons down, and I can dictate the pace of this engagement, I can chip away both of his Jupiters piece by piece without taking a shot of return fire, because I've got a 300 meter advantage.
Yep. But that brings up a good point. So, the Minerva's 2 squadrons have the lowest Colonial squadron evasion in the game at 15. And in fact, that means that they will actually get outdone on the evasion stat compared to most Cylon squadrons. Or, well, maybe not most. Well, most in practice, but even against the non-carriers among the Cylons, the non-pure carriers, I think they still hit like 13 evasion on max hanger.
Yeah, stuff like the Argos, it doesn't go that high.
Yeah. So, at 15, not a lot of evasion, so very much more than the other Battlestars, don't rely upon your 2 squadrons as an offensive element. Not that you can't use them, because you definitely want to use the Minerva from as long range as possible, just because it can't take a hit. But even more try and do that fighter battle over your own turf, where you can let its 3 extra PDCs help out, and really don't be afraid to use its 2 munitions in an offensive role.
Yeah, that's something that I wanted to get to with the Minerva, actually. It's Munition Hardpoints. This is what makes Minerva a little bit different in its application. Because normally on Battlestars, support munitions are the go-to. Especially with the Jupiter, the Artemis gets a bit more flexibility. The Minerva is one where you're almost encouraged to put offensive munitions on there.
Yeah.
Doubling up with armor piercers or torpedoes can make for a very dangerous Minerva.
Yeah.
If you double up with armor piercing missiles, any target that you engage, so long as you can get through AMD, you can strip the armor right off and use all of that firepower that you've got on the Minerva and shred the target. You bring double torpedoes, you can go base star hunting.
Yep. And of course, double torpedoes. Well, I normally don't bring it on things with Battlestar Artillery, just because Battlestar Artillery already does such wonders to base stars. Is still really nice against base stars that are below you for whatever reason, though hopefully they're not when it comes to the Minerva. It's got almost as great maneuverability as the Artemis does. Just a hair slower, I want to say like 5 meters a second. So, you can't, not much will outdive an Artemis, or not much will outdive a Minerva, but won't outdive an Artemis. Like the Artemis, if it does outdive you, roll ship, you can probably still get your top guns onto target. It of course does have teeny tiny flak, so you can put a ship directly behind it or whatever, but unless the shots are coming from above to a ship that's below you, you're going to have a hard time using its flak to protect other ships.
Yeah.
It's really got flak pretty much only for itself. It's kind of selfish.
And even then, it's not the greatest at it because it is very easy to get over or under a Minerva's flak bubble.
Yep. Teeny tiny flak bubble. So the Minerva is kind of, not like your other battle stars. You don't want it on your front lines. You're going to want it kind of in your back line, using its 2 munitions, using its longer gun range. Not that it shouldn't be, keeping pace with your fleet, but don't put it in front of your fleet. Put it in the back of your fleet. The only thing that should really be behind a Minerva would be maybe your Atlas, Berserks, and Celestra.
Yeah, its flak exists for self-protection.
Yeah.
That being said, the Minerva, it basically exists to kick other ships in the teeth.
Yep.
And it wants to do so, and it wants to set up the battlefield in such an arrangement that it takes as little return fire as possible. Because if a Minerva starts taking return fire, a Minerva falls to pieces.
Yep. So, even more, so like Jupiter's, if you get surrounded by the enemy fleet, the world is not over. Oh, hey, look at that. I scored another hit with the Battlestar Artillery. I think. How many birds are here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
No. You scraped it with some PDCs.
Yep. Bummer. Yeah, so the Jupiters, if you get surrounded by the enemy fleet, it's got enough armor. You can probably make it survive. But the Minerva, very much don't engage more than one ship at a time. It's not going to end well for the Minerva. It will die.
Yeah. Now, with the Jupiter, you'll usually want to make fairly defensive or armored-oriented fleets, or fleets that are okay with taking a hit. Artemis is the jack of all trades that can fit in anywhere and it will be happy. The Minerva wants to be part of high mobility, high aggressive fleets. It wants things like the Berserk and the Adamant to come along with it. If it wants munition ships, it would prefer the Ranger to come along with it instead of the Janus. But considering it has 2 munition slots, if you're bringing a Minerva or 2, you generally don't need munition ships with you. You'll probably want to bring Artemis to help bulk up squadron numbers. If you don't mind leaving ships dragging behind, you can bring along an Atlas or 2 with Minerva to just fall behind and literally provide squadron support for it. But the Minerva wants to be part of a small group of ships that wants to move quickly, isolate enemy ships, and tear them to pieces before the rest of the enemy fleet can get involved.
Yep.
It doesn't want to get into a traditional fleet versus fleet, we're going to trade shots with each other. The Minerva wants to play the wolf pack and hunt down anything that it can catch by itself.
Yeah. Or if you can catch the enemy on the flank, pick off the closest ship as the next enemy ship comes into range, pick that one off. As the next one comes to range, pick that one off. One at a time. Keep it to one at a time. That way it's massive artillery, 11 PDCs or the 4 mediums on the back, whatever, can pick down that one target. And you don't have to worry so much about your thin armor getting overwhelmed.
Basically, if you play fair with a Minerva, you're going to have a bad time.
Yeah. The Minerva is not for playing fair. So, yeah, that pretty much... Let me double check, make sure we didn't miss anything here. Don't rush. Da-da. Yeah, we talked about everything. Yep, that's pretty much it. So, do you want to let these ships kill each other, or do you want to just quit out?
Your discretion.
All right, we'll kill each other.
Pew, pew.
It won't take long.
Considering you've got 2 Jupiters,
Yeah.
This is not going to go well.
Yeah.
Is it the gut instinct here?
So I talked about don't launch flak, or don't throw your fighters out into your own flak field. Bear in mind, folks, it will pop up the little icon saying launching squadron on the side that you're launching your squadron at. So just, if you activate the flak on the left, make sure you don't launch the squadron on that side. You can launch the squadron on the other side if you want, though.
Bear in mind that when you're recovering them, as ZDog did say before, you can recover squadrons whilst you've got your flak field up. They'll just go around to the opposite flight pod. If you have multiple battle stars that are all providing flak, be a little careful with that, because if one of your flak fields starts to overlap a battle star that wants to retrieve its fighters, you may shred one of your squadrons as it returns trying to get in. Be careful with overlap.
Yeah, that is, of course, especially a problem for the Jupiter with its massive flag field size. Actually, I'm going to end up wasting my missiles here. Crunch, crunch, crunch. That's fine. Whatever.
Confirmed squadron target. Yes, Commander.
Trying to think. Let's see. Yeah, that pretty much covers it. I do really like the Battlestars, and they are, I'm glad they are the namesake of this, because they're beautiful. Oh, am I gonna get rocket hits on you? That would be entertaining. Nope, you're gonna dodge them. Rockets are like torpedoes, so yeah, be advised. They will, be dodged by vertical movement. Don't let your Artemis, or really even your Minerva either, get hit by torpedoes. It's embarrassing for everyone.
So say we all.
One of the things that if you are bringing offensive munitions on your Battlestars, or your enemy did, stagger out, fire your munitions one at a time at enemy Battlestars just to force them to keep their flak up for longer. Like people, it's easy to. Oh, I did actually hit your top armor. That's awesome. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Yep, there's the.
Yep, that Minerva's as good as dead now.
Yep,
Yes.
can't run. And so this is very much what I was talking about with. So your munitions haven't been fired yet, so I kind of want to keep my flak going. And of course, as long as I have my flak going, I can't fire my munitions. So if your opponent's brought munitions on a Battlestar, fire munitions at it, even if he's got flak once in a while, just to kind of be like, yeah, keep that up, because I'm gonna wait for you to bring it down. Fire munitions at you, make it hurt. I love the Viper ones. Just
Don't get to use them nearly enough.
you don't. They're
Also,
They're
interesting
so
note on the
adorable.
Minerva that hasn't been brought up at this point.
Uh-huh.
For most Battlestars, the fire control is on top, the engineering is on bottom.
That's true. Yes.
This is not the case for the Minerva.
Yes.
The Minerva has this reversed. It has engineering on top and fire control on bottom. So, if you're diving and you take top armor damage, you'll end up losing your engineering. Now, the ship is made of paper anyway. So under sustained fire, it's gonna die.
Yeah.
But it does have the nice little advantage where you're not gonna lose your combat performance whilst you're taking damage whilst you're diving under a target. Whereas with the other Battlestars, if you try to dive under a target with them, and if you dive too far, you present risk with your top armor. Because once that cracks, you lose your fire control, and you lose your fire control, you're dead.
Yeah.
The Minerva just keeps going until it gives out.
Yeah, you will lose your engineering, which, not ideal, but also not the end of the world. God. The Battlestar artillery doing 3 points of subsystem damage a shot.
Yep. That is it for the Minerva. It is officially having a bad day.
Yeah.
Because the Jupiter Mark II, if it does get in range of something,
So say we all.
it will shred it to absolute pieces.
Yeah.
This here, where we've had a Minerva and an Artemis go up against a pair of Jupiters, there's no real way that this is going to win out.
Yeah,
unless
it was
I play
horribly lopsided.
unless I play the skimming range advantage on these Jupiters and I try to flank from behind, and I play that for the next 3 hours.
Yeah.
This is not really going to happen.
Well, and even at that,
that was not a thing.
yeah, it would have been, even then, it would have been extremely difficult because, of course, since the Minerva has weaker evasion on its squadrons, and even after, we sacrificed one of my Raptors earlier, I had my 2 Raptors to help with that fighter battle. Like, just on squadrons alone, this probably would have been a victory for the Jupiters, even if you had played that range advantage perfectly. So, yeah, this is more just explosions are pretty.
Yeah.
One of the things that's probably worth mentioning while we're just goofing off right now, taking a break, is that the Minerva's armor facing differences are such that it does not need to turn to use its different armor facings as much as the other ships do. Its front and rear are so large. Its left and right are so small. It ends up taking a lot of hits on all of its armor facings, and doesn't really need to turn.
System repairs underway. Got it.
Probably gonna end up losing the Jupiter too, but that's mostly just because I don't care.
Target active.
Oh, maybe not.
Approved. Give me manual control now.
Oh wow, Jupiter
Oof.
2 on 2 hit points. Alrighty
That's
then.
rough.
2 hit points. Man, I used so much of that armor though. It had like no armor left.
But yeah, as a kind of general wrap up for the Battlestars, if you run the Jupiters, you're generally running a more slow, defensive, methodical fleet that wants to keep everything together. And odds are, even though it wants to keep everything together and provide a shield, it still wants to start off going straight for the enemy.
Yeah.
The Artemis is a jack of all trades Battlestar where you can fit that thing anywhere and it will shine. Any kind of fleet layout or method of play that you want to do, the Artemis will find a way. Just remember to keep its inherent strengths and weaknesses in mind where you do, and play them as best you can. The Minerva it exists to hit things with a sledgehammer and set up a battle in such a way that it's not taking shots back. Because if the Minerva gets shot back, it's sad.
It is very sad.
It's painful to watch. So, what ships did you want to cover next?
Alright, so I have next the Gunships, the Heracles, and the Minotaur, followed by missile cruisers, Ranger Janus, then the 2 carriers, and then the escorts, the Adamant and Minotaur, followed by the support, the Celestra. Kind of arbitrary designations. I could probably just build a fleet, throw them all into one grouping, all into one fleet. That should all fit. I think, well, that's more than 7 ships though, isn't it?
A little bit.
So let's see, if I go Heracles.
Let's do Gunships and Munition ships first.
Yeah.
So, Heracles, Minotaur, Ranger, and Janus.
Yep. And Janus. I'll go ahead and throw our 2 carriers here in the back as well. We can cover them. Save ourselves a loading screen. Do you want to bring an Adamant, a Manic? Well, yeah, bring an Adamant and a Minotaur and a Celestra. Then we can save ourselves a pair of loading screens. There we go. And I will set up another match. This is where things start getting fun. We get to boatloads of guns for a bargain price.
I have bought the fleet aptly named Stuff.
Yep, that seems apt. Oh, you're not going to wish me good luck?
I don't think I need to.
I don't know what you're talking about. I think I'm totally...
If you screw up this engagement, I don't know what to tell you.
Maybe stop using boost so much.
Yeah,
Alright.
like if you boost thruster constantly and you didn't deploy a single squadron, maybe.
Yeah, it would take...
And you put on a blindfold.
Yeah, it would take a pretty decent bit of being special there. Okay. So first one, let's start with the Heracles.
Sure.
Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention when I was talking about size 4 ships, the Heracles is also size 4, and has the 4-kilometer radius range. Like the Battlestars, it also has flak, which is, I just realized, it's situated a lot closer to the ship itself than the Battlestar's
the Heracles
flak
flak is definitely not designed for fleet protection.
But it is large enough that, you know, if you hug some ships to it, the flak will protect more than just itself.
Yeah, you bring a cheeky Adamant or Berserk or Minotaur alongside Heracles, you can keep it safe.
Yeah. Here, if I switch it to the right-hand side, you can see how, you know, there's definitely room for a Minotaur to sit, you know, in the full height of this, above or below the Heracles. So, you know, don't be afraid to use the Heracles' flak to protect other stuff, but do bear in mind that it situates much closer to the ship itself than the Battlestars, which kind of project their flag out a distance. It does mean that it's, you know, between the size of the flak field and how close it is, it's pretty hard to hit a Heracles with missiles when it's using its flak. Wow, I just realized. I think because of the shape of the Heracles itself, it's much harder to hit it with missiles from below than it is above. Because of the way the armor is sloped up.
Yeah, the Heracles has got a pretty slim profile in general.
Well, I just mean like it's the armor
Yes,
slopes up in front.
Mm.
Okay. So the Heracles has some extended gun range. I should have just sent a Raptor forward to ID your stuff. Oh well. Has extended gun range. It's only 5%, so it's the same range that you get on the Minerva.
Got it.
So you're coming straight at me. I gotta be careful not to kill you before we get to your ships.
Mm-hmm.
So with the Heracles, you know, you can max out this range, and then if we look at the turrets, you're getting the 6,000 meters. So it's the same range as the Cylons. You won't be outranged. The Heracles is very much a door knocker, though. Like, it has the flak to provide a broadside, but you only have 60 points of armor on the sides, whereas you have 120 on front and 100 top and bottom. So whenever possible, you kind of want to charge straight in with it and go, you know, directly above or directly below your target. You know, so that you're using the front armor as you close into range, and then the top or bottom armor once you're in range, or once you are over the target or under the target. You got a lot of armor on those surfaces. The top and bottom are your fire control and engineering. So, you know, pick carefully whether you want to be above or below your target. Below your target means that you're below where he mostly has guns, probably, but you do have your fire control vulnerable. Obviously, if there are missiles coming in, use your flak. You've got a pretty good amount of strafe on here.
Yes, sir.
Whether you use your posture or not. So it can kind of turn and flak and still be charging straight ahead. Use the flak, but don't use your broadside when you don't have to. You do get 10 PDCs that providing you that flak coverage. So with again the extra range, so feel free to use it to help with squadron engagement if that's what's around. But try and just charge in with this thing. That's what it's well suited for. Don't think you're getting a lot of guns by using the front. I think looks like 4 guns on front, 2 guns on front.
I think it's 3.
Is it 3? Let's see. Doop doop front. Front 3. Yep, 3 guns. Heavy guns, so it's a decent bit of door knocking. But against lighter stuff, you'd be just as well off with the 10 PDCs. Don't feel like you're gonna win any awards. However, 2, 4, 6, 8 heavy guns top and bottom. So that's where most of your firepower is. Since it's 8 heavy top and bottom, you don't really care whether a target's above or below you. 8 heavy guns, like you can give Battlestars a run for their money. Their Battlestar artillery obviously gonna work a number on this, but with its heavy 100 points of top and bottom armor, 120 front, this sucker will, for the points, really contest a Battlestar in terms of the gunfight. I would have no problem running one of these into the Kratos. The Kratos will probably win with its 10 heavy guns versus this thing's 8 and all of its munitions, but Heracles is less than half the cost of a Kratos, so you're not doing badly. That's really kind of all there is to talk about with the Heracles. Do be aware. Oh, whoops. Oh, I love the Celestial armor. I left that on the full offensive. Fortunately, we didn't kill
the Heracles is designed and built all around the idea of basically sending it nose first into the enemy.
Yep.
And it's got the durability to do that, but the same kind of concept as the Jupiter. Just because you can does not always mean that you should.
Yeah.
When you're bringing the Heracles along, you're bringing it with the intent to put hurt onto targets. But you don't want to start throwing it into about 4 Battlestars worth of firepower, because even with its slim profile and its 120 armor on the front, it will get shredded.
Yeah. An important thing to remember...
You need to exercise discretion with how you be aggressive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Again, just like always, try and only pick on one ship at a time. If you're shooting at more than one ship, the world's not over. It's got the armor relative to its points cost, that it's not going to be too bad. But don't do it if you don't have to. Don't take more damage than you have to. And feel free to use its extended gun range to your advantage, especially if you're shooting at things that can't shoot back at all because they don't have it, or they have very few guns. Take advantage of that. I think that's pretty much all there is to talk about for the Heracles. The other thing I wanted to talk about. When it comes to other things shooting at it, do remember, despite its slim profile, it is still a size 4 ship. So in terms of the game mechanics, it's actually still pretty easy to hit. It's just as easy to hit the Heracles as it is the Kratos with guns. Or very nearly so. With how misses might happen, it might be able to avoid more misses than like a Kratos can, but yeah. You're gonna see a lot of stuff hitting this just because it's so big in terms of game mechanics.
Kind of fleets that the Heracles wants to be brought along. If you're bringing Jupiters and the such, you're not gonna see a Heracles because of the point cost involvement of it, and generally how the ship performs. If you're taking Jupiters along, you'll want to go more towards the Minotaur. However, if you're going more along Artemis and you're going along more a lot of Adamants and Atlas kind of thing, and you're going for a more lower point cost fleet, but you still want to get flak smattered around, the Heracles is a nice pick. If you want a separate fleet element, where if you want a core Battlestar or two for the center of your fleet, and you want a second piece that can move around, and you don't want to invest in things like sweepers and PCMs, and you still want something with bite, the Heracles can do that. It can move quick enough, and it can provide the protection to keep a separate element safe.
Yeah, if I look... oh, it doesn't tell you the actual distance it moves in here. But it moves pretty quick. I want
Heracles and like the Minotaur, they are very good for dealing with enemy gunships, specifically. Like Revenants. There are two ships at the
Revenant does
fear.
not want to mess with the Heracles.
There is literally only two ships that the Revenant fears. That is the Minotaur and the Heracles.
I'd say a Ranger or a Janus.
Well, Rangers and Janus is usually there's something to support and cover that. The only thing that the Revenant itself can't approach is the Heracles and the Minotaur, because they've got the range to be on par, and they've got the firepower to cut them down.
Yep.
Any of the Battlestars, it can just completely outmaneuver and outrange them.
Now, of course, an important consideration there, of course, is your Dratus ranges. But yeah, certainly, if you can get Dratus ranges, stuff's going to get torn up.
Full attack mode. Fire at will.
Oh, I'm shooting at your Taipans.
That is a lot of Vacker incoming.
I see that cheeky nuke. So yeah, that pretty much covers the Heracles. Let's talk about the other gunship, the Minotaur. Minotaur. About a quarter less points. You have more side armor. But of course you lose all of that front and top goodiness. This is actually weirdly got more bottom armor than top armor. That feels weird. You lose 2 heavy guns on your top and bottom. But that's not too bad considering, I mean, you're a quarter less points. Losing a quarter of the heavy gun's not too bad. Your broadside goes from the 10 PDCs to 6 medium guns, though, which is pretty awesome. And is one of the big reasons that this thing is such a threat to a Revenant, because of course your heavy guns not super accurate at the edge of the range where the Revenant is going to try and stick at, because the Revenant has broadside light guns, which only have 1 range increment for the Cylons. So these 6 mediums do a lot of work. The 6 mediums also pretty solid at picking on squadrons, if that's what you got to do. We can see this when you're using, Rangers and Berserks to shoot at squadrons, because they're pretty good at it. The Minotaur, same way, is going to do the same thing. One of the things worth mentioning when it comes to the Minotaur and its guns, it is the only Colonial ship, I don't know if some of the Cylons do, but it is the only Colonial ship where on neutral posture it has bonus accuracy on its turrets.
Yeah, the Minotaur is definitely a sharpshooter.
So, if you go to full offensive, it's shooting at plus 100, or at 120% weapon range and 126% accuracy, which means it is the most accurate Colonial gunship. In fact, actually,
it's the most
your
accurate
adamant,
Colonial ship
however,
period.
whatever the distance is to your adamant right now, is like right at the edge of the range. You're pretty much only out of range on the vertical distance. You're like maybe 50 meters out of range on the horizontal plane alone. So definitely with this thing, you're going to want to play the range game. It's got enough armor, it can take a few hits, but it's clearly only a medium-sized ship. If we compare it to the Adamant, Adamant's got 60 armor on the side. This is only a little bit heavier at 75. So it's okay if it takes a few hits, but try and play that range advantage. Try and play that accuracy advantage. Both in terms of the high accuracy of your medium guns and the bonus accuracy really boosting those heavy guns.
The general playstyle with the Minotaur, because you may be thinking to yourself, okay, so the Heracles is basically just a better Minotaur. Well, the Minotaur has got the increased accuracy, and it's also got a much more defensive profile about it. Because of that, because it's got that extra bottom armor, it is a ship that is snug and it is well suited to escorting battlestars and covering that lower blind spot.
Yes.
It is very good at discouraging
the Artemis
flanking enemies.
especially.
And with those medium guns and with its increased accuracy heavies, it is the only ship that can look at a Revenant, get into a firefight with it, and win, and come away okay. Because the Minotaur will get into that straight-up firefight with a Revenant, and it will just crap over it.
Yeah. So, when it comes to shooting at enemy ships, the Heracles will probably do just a little bit. You got 2 nukes, you cheeky bugger.
I have so many nukes.
I guess you do have the Celestra there for reloads too, don't you?
Maybe.
Anyway, when it comes to shooting at the size 4 ships, the Heracles may well do better with the 2 extra heavy guns top and bottom, 1 extra heavy gun on front, I think. What is the... Yeah, the Minotaur is shooting 2 heavy guns on front, so you're losing a heavy gun on the front too with the Minotaur. So losing 3 heavy guns total on against a base star or other size 4 ship, the Heracles may well do better, especially with the extra armor to help it really have the staying power against larger ships. But against small and medium-sized ships, you're rude.
Did you just notice the hits
The
on
nuke is going against something besides the... so yeah, the Minotaur will do better against things like the Adamant, and Berserks, and Revenants, and Rangers. If a Ranger's not shooting missiles at it. It's better against the smaller targets, Manicor's Nemesis, because of those medium guns.
It can shred.
Yeah, those medium guns really help it pick on the smaller targets in a way that the Heracles will have a little more trouble with, without costing more than those. So like the Adamant there, 750 points plus 60 for the Viper 2, plus 40 for the torpedoes or 80 for a PCM, whatever you put on that. Adamant easily costing 850 with the upgrades. The Minotaur at 900, right? 900? Something like that. 950? Yeah, not a lot more. So, Minotaur and Heracles, both gunships, both can, swap out for the other in a pinch if that's what you need. But
it's 900. It
is 900? Okay. Is it the Revenant's 850 then? Because I feel like the Revenant is cheaper than the Minotaur.
The Revenant is 850, yes.
Yep.
I've just got the guide up there.
Yeah. I'm out of Windows. So bear in mind, when trying to decide whether you need a Heracles or a Minotaur, they serve different roles. The Heracles very much wants to be in its own wing of or division of your fleet. The Minotaur, just while it's high speed, can let it keep up with Adamants and Berserks better than the Heracles can. Complements the Battlestars more nicely. They can provide flak for it. It can provide more guns for the points that the Battlestars are missing out on.
I suppose
and hit smaller targets that the Battlestars have trouble with.
The biggest comparison and the biggest difference that you might want to point out between the Heracles and the Minotaur is that when you get a Heracles, you get in a ship that wants to kick the opponent in the face, and it can do that well, and it can protect itself whilst it does that. The Minotaur is a fleet escort. and it's got the speed to choose which ships it wants to be playing escort for. It can stay slow, and it can stay with the Jupiters, or it can go fast, and it can go with the Artemis, and go along with things like Adamants and Berserks. It's got choices, and honestly, because of its all-around arcs, the Minotaur, it doesn't get put off by being slow. It's not like if you bring an Artemis and you try to bring that alongside a Jupiter, you're just screwing over the Artemis because its ventral firepower is crap. The Minotaur being a fleet escort doesn't have that problem.
Yeah.
And it is dirt cheap to bring it.
Yeah.
Compared to the Heracles.
So yeah, the Minotaur is very nice, and it so nicely complements the Battlestars, or it has the speed to keep up with your lighter elements. It will go very happily in either option.
Yes, sir.
But yeah, for me personally, like the Waggle personal choice.
You okay, babe?
Doing great, darling.
You were saying preference?
Yeah, personal Waggle preference is if I'm fleet escorts on a budget, I need to bulk up firepower. I bring the Minotaur.
Yeah.
If I want something that's aggressive, I want something that's focused, I want a bit of purpose, and I don't want to commit battle stars to that, I got the Heracles.
Yep. Let's see. I think that pretty much covers that. Yeah.
Munition cruisers.
Yep. All right, so let's talk about the original one, for the Ranger. The Ranger is a new model design, quote unquote, which can be seen in its rapid firing missile launchers. They fire every other turn, which means that this sucker pumps out damage. I want to say for raw damage per turn, you can probably get more damage out of a Ranger than anything else.
Munition-wise and Colonial Fleet, yeah.
I mean, even Cylons. Well, no, I guess that's not true.
No,
there's the
because the
Kratos.
Kratos,
Yeah, other than the Kratos, which is a new addition. But, you know, this will push
The
out...
Argos rotating
more-
munitions and over time.
Yeah, the Argos will outlast it. But, yeah, the Argos is firing every third turn, right?
You can have a salvo out every single turn if you want.
Well, but only one. Well, that's true. You're right.
That'll be the same
So,
for the Ranger.
yeah, it's the
because it
same-
alternates its barrels.
Yeah.
But
You're right.
anyway,
Yeah.
less of the hard comparison.
Yeah, so you get 4 medium guns on the broadside, as well as 2 medium guns on bottom, or is it 2 medium front or 2 heavy front?
Two heavies front.
2 heavies front, that's right. Which you don't really want to be using those. You're really much better off using your broadsides, because honestly, 4 mediums broadside plus 2 mediums bottom, that's basically it's more firepower than you get out of the Berserk. Because the Berserk's sitting on... Oh, no, I'm sorry. It's the same. No, it's more. 6.
No, it's
6
one
instead
more.
of the
So
Berserk's
it's
4.
5.
Yeah, or 5. Blip, blip, blip. Cannot talk. Downside. So if we were to compare this to the Minotaur, and I say this because it actually comes out as a surprisingly good comparison, you've got the same number of medium guns you can bring onto a target. What you're losing out is the 6 heavies to gain 2 rapid-firing missile slots. You're right around the same speed, but you're also losing out on the armor. So Ranger very much wants to play longer range and
Yes, Commander.
use those missiles up. Feel free to have it help the gun line when it comes to that. But it's got decent guns. I really like using its guns to help squadron battles. 6 mediums goes a long way towards turning a squadron battle in your favor.
That being said, colonial guns in general unless they're in the lowest range bracket and they happen to be light guns or PDCs, they're kind of meh. Medium guns are okay in very big quote marks, but you need a lot of them to start seeing the impact properly.
Yeah. Well, so
a single ranger is not going to swing a fight to battle for you. It'll help. It'll put a bit of damage, but it will not be a big decider into whether you're going to win it or not. If you had like 2 rangers and 2 minotaurs, and you pour all that into a fleet, into a fighter engagement, you might start seeing something happen.
Yeah, it's very much my tournament fleet, 2 adamants and 2 berserks. That's 8 light guns and 10 medium guns. That can swing the fight in my favor. So, the 6 mediums you get on a ranger on its own, not gonna swing the fight. But, if it's a dead even fight and you've got 6 mediums and he doesn't, use them.
So,
or if you've got something else, if you've got something else to go with it, use it. That will make a significant difference for you. Because on the full offensive, your short range bracket goes out to 3,600 meters, something like that. Pretty long range. In terms of, you can handily cover the entire fighter brawl in that range bracket. And even if it does go outside of that, you're only out 1 range bracket. You're not losing too much accuracy.
Yeah, but with the ranger, the weapons that it has, the actual guns, are more the icing on the cake.
Yes.
The big thing about the ranger
Those
is
missiles.
its munition slots, and it's got a pair of rapid reload tubes. It's only got a 2-turn cooldown, so you'll fire it, it's out for 1 round, and then the next round, it's back up. So you can either alternate turns and have a salvo going out every single turn for like a solid 10 turns constantly, depending on your munition. Or you can have a turn down, a turn up, a turn down, a turn up.
Yeah.
Which means that with stuff like guided munitions, you can have constant pressure. If you're playing against a colonial play, the presence of a ranger means you can force them to have flak up. You can force them to be responding to missiles with their Vipers, or you can run it in a bit more of a utility role.
Yes, it very much will take any munition.
It is very good for pulling in utility munitions if you just bring a single ranger along. If you put a pair of PCMs onto a ranger, you've got a ton of missile defense. If you put a pair of debris mines on there, no squadron's going to want to get close to your fleet, because there is just going to be clouds of death everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
If you bring any of the tried and traditional mines, or if you bring EMP mines, the minefield that you can set up with a ranger becomes disgusting.
Yeah, the only munition I really wouldn't bother putting on it is, as funny as as it is to put 2 EMP generators on it, it's flat not durable enough to take advantage of that.
Yeah, trying to make that work is a mission unto itself.
Yeah.
If you can make it work, a pair of EMP generators on a ranger is going to wreck a fleet if it gets into range, but the ship does not have the durability for that.
Yeah.
Like, the things that you'd have to do to prep to allow a ranger to go and do that, you might as well have bought another ship that contributes to actually just getting the job done.
Or the only way I can really see it maybe working out is if you try and use it against like a carrier fleet that just flat doesn't have the guns to stop it. Is the only chance, even chance at it. It's I wouldn't recommend it. But any other munitions, whether it's debris mines, PCMs, proximity mines, EMP mines, or armor piercer and guided missile, it's got the speed to work into an enemy flank and provide munitions from an angle he isn't prepared to deal with without sacrificing or making himself vulnerable to the rest of your fleet. So don't let the ranger get in range of enemy guns, but other than that, do whatever you'd like with it. I don't recommend bringing more than 1, maybe 2, just because you're spending too many points on the task. But
Yeah, if you bring 2 Rangers, you're probably putting torpedoes on them, and you're going base star hunting.
Yeah. And I really hate trying to hunt base stars with torpedoes. Just
When I
because
say
they're
base stars,
so
I mean
durable.
the standard base star
Yeah.
that physically cannot dodge torps. Because if you
Yeah.
ID enemy base stars, you can just start launching torpedoes at them with reckless abandon.
Yeah.
Because they physically cannot dodge them.
2 Rangers with 4 torpedoes would also be an excellent way to just say no to any Cerberus fleet. Because I'm fairly certain you might be able to get a 1-turn kill
Cerberus?
off of 4 torpedo slots.
Probably not a 1-turn kill, because that's 40 damage per slot, probably up to about...
Well, that's
maybe
40
about
without
posture.
adjusting posture, which would get you another 8 points, I think.
Something like that. Math on camera.
Let's see. That's 16% salvo size, and the salvo size is 10.
Yeah,
So
so
you
you
would
get
get
an extra
2?
torpedo out of it.
One?
No, it
Is
doesn't
it round down?
It doesn't round.
Okay. So you get 44, that's 88, 176? Yes.
No, you wouldn't be able to 1-turn a
Yeah.
Cerberus for that.
So you'd need...
You do nasty damage, but you would
Yeah.
not 1-turn.
Um,
You 2-turn a base star piece of cake, though.
yeah.
Or a Cerberus, for that matter.
Yeah. Even with spinning, you would do it.
That being said, if you put AP missiles onto a Ranger, you can soften a lot of targets very quickly, and you can start stripping armor like a madman.
And that's probably, in general, 1 AP, 1 guided, probably a good go-to for your Ranger's offensive loadout. Honestly, actually.
It depends on the loadout of the rest of your fleet.
Yeah.
If you want the Ranger to be a bit more self-sufficient, the 1-1 would be nice. If the rest of your fleet has got a lot of gunpowder or it's got its own munitions to play with, you can go ahead and put 2 AP on that, and you can just soften everything, and then let a ton of gunships and Battlestar artillery just shred exposed hull.
Yeah. The other thing is, Rangers actually probably do make pretty effective base star hunters, just because those 6 mediums will actually let them outgun all of the base stars, I realize, except the Kratos. Because the Cerberus has 3 heavies, and the base star has 2 heavies. The 6 mediums on the Ranger will definitely outgun it. It doesn't really have the durability to want to do it alone. But yeah, don't feel bad about that.
Actual positioning in a fleet. The Ranger is definitely a ship that wants to try and stick around Battlestars where it can. Because with its 6 medium guns, it can actually contribute to a gunfight if it needs to get involved. But because of that broadside, it doesn't need to be like the Janus. The Janus has to be above things. Mm-hmm. It has to have the height advantage, or it can't shoot at things. The Ranger doesn't have this problem, so it can stick with the fleet.
Yeah.
It probably wants
still...
to be back a little bit.
Yeah.
But it can stick with the fleet.
Let it shoot over the shoulders.
Yeah.
It doesn't
like
have the range
bonus
to like the Berserk does to really do that well, but that's really okay. It does even more than like any other ship besides the Berserk in the game. Berserk, Celestra obviously really don't have the armor to get shot at. The Ranger is pretty much, for the points, just as bad. It's got very little armor. Let it shoot over the shoulder. If it doesn't shoot the entire time, then fine. It can help support the squadron battle, whatever.
And when we say over the shoulder, we're talking the kind of distance where your Ranger is from your Minotaur right now. Kind of
this
shoulder.
Minotaur is shooting over the shoulder of the Heracles.
And it won't really shoot so much in that it'll take a turn to pop above or below your flak field, throw out its munitions at the enemy, and then the next turn dive back down.
Yeah.
Kind of like peeking out from cover, firing, and then going back into cover sort of thing. Yep. That's where the Ranger's happy.
Yeah.
Or you can just pack it full of support munitions, keep it relatively tight, and just throw debris mines and PCMs and actual mines everywhere, and just give your opponent a grade A goddamn headache.
Yeah, and I also like the idea of, if you can keep it out of Dratus range, which probably only going to happen if you're not going against Cylons, but if you can keep it out of Dratus range, let it, feel free to let it just run around on a flank, out on its own. As long as it's not gotten Dratus locked, your enemy's not really going to be able to hit it with much of anything, and it can just pepper munitions from awkward angles for him to defend against.
Yeah, you will definitely want Viper coverage or sweepers.
Yeah.
To wander around with a ranger. That's a sentence.
Yeah. Keep fighters off of it, enemy fighters off of it, because it has so little armor, it will get picked apart really quickly.
Mostly for the munition coverage on it, because if the ranger gets caught out by hostile munitions, it goes bang.
Yeah. Super soft. It cannot afford to get shot at.
Alive for long. Not for how much it costs.
Yep. Let's see. Anything else we need to cover about this? No.
Flip over to the Janus.
Like the Minerva, it's really difficult to play, but it does give you a lot of bang for not too much buck.
The Ranger works. You've just got to put in the effort to make it work, and there's a lot of other ships that you can choose, which I'm just kind of like fall asleep, no brain, and it'll work and it'll mesh together.
Yeah.
Ranger needs some very finicky play styles to get something out of it. If you do it, it's great. If you make a cock up, you are going to pay with a Ranger.
Yeah.
The Janus, on the other hand,
is very forgiving. 95
yes.
Front, left, right, 80 rear, top, bottom. It's got really a lot of durability. If your enemy wants to waste munitions or whatever on it, honestly, don't feel like you have to stop those with your own fighters or flak or whatever. Let him. This thing will dodge torpedoes, and if he wants to waste guided munitions, whether it's guided missiles or AP missiles on it, let him. Like, it's like, okay, you are not shooting at a very expensive ship. This thing's 900 before you, or 950?
950 points.
Before you...
950 points, and you've basically got a Battlestar's worth of durability.
Yeah.
The Janus is a flying brick.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to say this is... Yeah, this should be more durable than the Minerva. On any given facing, and when you count up all of its armor, significantly more durable. Maybe not on any single facing, it's not more durable, but using its armor fully, you're probably getting more total hit points out of a Janus than you are a Minerva.
The Janus, with its munition slots, because it's got itself 3 munition points to work with compared
with a bonus 20% salvo size, which means at full attack, it's 136%.
It also means that if you run a Janus as a support ship with support munitions, you are missing out on one of the biggest features of the Janus, and that's its ability to spew out more munitions per salvo. So if you run things like PCMs and debris mines and actual mines on a Janus, you're not taking advantage of one of its biggest allures, and that's the fact that it can actually fire 5 guided missiles per salvo instead of the standard 4, and 5 AP missiles per standard instead of the standard 4 on that. Which means that if you put 1 AP and 2 guided onto a Janus, you can drop 60 armor and 60 hull damage onto a single target. And
which
give it
just about will kill an Adamant. Adamant's sitting on 80 hull.
It will do nasty things to a lot of targets that hits. And if you ever get bothered by any small ships, Nemesis, Cerastes,
it will delete those outright.
That kind of thing.
Unless they turn enough to spread the damage out, but even they're going to have a really hard time doing that. I think probably the Minotaur is the only one you're going to be able to do that reliably with.
And if you bring a pair of Janus with 1 AP to guided, you can start going Battlestar hunting.
Yeah.
Because when you can drop 120 armor and 120 hull damage onto a target with a single salvo output, you start making Jupiter sweat. The actual positioning on the Janus itself, its gun loadout is 2 mediums front and 3 heavy on below, if memory serves.
Yes.
The back to front.
Yep.
It
very much wants to be above its targets.
And pointing at them.
Yes, and pointing at them. Because that gives you 5 guns. That's as much as you get on like a Berserk. It's almost as many as you get on the Ranger. Probably, depending on what you're shooting at, it'll be better than the Ranger just because 3 of them are heavies versus mediums. It's the same number of guns as you get on the Atlas, which we'll get to.
Yeah.
So, 1 Janus, decent firepower, but you get 2 Janus, you're looking at like a Minotaur's worth of guns, just about. Not quite, especially when you throw in the accuracy bonus on the Minotaur. But, definitely don't be afraid to use their guns. Yes, they're a missile ship, but if you have it supporting other stuff, feel free to let it get into the engagement. It's got the durability to make it really take a long time to get rid of. It wants to be above targets. It likes pointing at targets, so definitely make sure you're strafing. Oh, why you gotta pick on the poor Ranger?
Because I had 2 nukes left, and I wasn't leaving them in the tubes.
Yes, Commander. Yes, Commander.
Let's see if I can save it. So, yeah, Janus, massive salvos. Do be careful, you've got a pretty long cooldown. But, that long cooldown and the 3rd munition slot does mean that and its much higher durability means it has a lot more staying power than the Ranger or the Minerva in terms of, munitions output. So, obviously it will eventually lose out to an Argos. But for the Colonials, it's really a nice, easy to play missile cruiser. Do be careful, it's slow. You're not really going to be able to use it to go for those flanking missile shots like you can with the Ranger. It's much more a fleet accompaniment vessel.
The Janus will spend most of its life on boost thruster until you get into combat range.
Yeah. Obviously, don't boost thruster if you're going to let it tank some missile hits. Tanking missile hits is a good time to go ahead and throw full defensive. Get that 22% damage reduction. But yeah. Since only 2 of its 5 guns are mediums, can't really do much to help you with squadrons. Not saying you shouldn't try if that's the situation you're in, but it really is only going to shoot at capital ships.
The big thing about the Janus is that it's the cheapest brick money can buy, and its salvo output, its alpha strikes that can do with its munition salvos is nasty. It is all about picking a target and saying, I want to ruin that target's day.
Yeah. With its salvo size bonus, it almost has as much damage per turn as the Ranger. Not quite.
Generally speaking, you're not gonna generally want to play a Janus for sustainability. You'll generally want to play a Janus to pick targets and deal with them.
Yeah.
Like, you'll bring 1 AP to guided if you're not too sure of what you're going to be going up against, and you want something that can contribute to the hard fights, and it can take the easy fights and just remove them from the table. Like, you want enemy scouting elements or flanking elements to be given pause. Like, if someone's getting enthusiastic with like a Damant and Berserk flanks, you bring that Janus along and now they've got to dedicate AMD assets to it, or you're going to start picking off ships one by one with its salvos. The Ranger, on the other hand, is sustainability. Or you can grab yourself a Janus with 3 torpedoes, fire off like 14 torpedoes per tube, and you can start... That is the epitome of base star hunting for the Colonials, is a Janus that's out with torps. Like, if a 3 torp Janus gets all of its torps onto something, it has a bad day.
And the Janus is, I think, 900 points base.
950.
Is it 950? Okay.
Yes.
But it does mean that because it's 100 points lower than the Ranger, you can much more easily afford to upgrade your munition slots as well, which is nice. In terms of when should you go ahead and run something besides offensive munitions like the mines or something? Oh no!
Hooray!
Ranger is taking damage.
Well, you know what's impressive is it survived that on full offensive.
On it, Commander.
Well, the nuke does 160 damage, so
Yeah.
the only way I was one tapping that was if I hit one of your 45 armor arcs.
Yep, and it hit the top. Woot. Anyway, actually, well, you should have been able to do it. Actually, oh, yeah, because even with full offensive, I've got enough damage reduction that the 60 and 90, 150 reduces it below 160 damage, or below the 150 that I can. Nice. Anyway, what was I saying? I don't remember. Yeah. Oh, non-offensive munitions, mine, the various single-shot munitions on the Janus. The Janus does well for that if you need to bring more than what you can fit onto the Ranger. You really need that third munition slot. Otherwise, you'll find that the rate of fire penalty is going to be kind of painful.
Like, the one time that mines on the Janus works is if you want to go full asshole and you put 3 MP mines onto a Janus and you want to play the long game.
Yeah.
Then you can do that.
They do make for great meme fleets of running 7 Janus with nothing but mines.
Yeah, if you want sustainable support with the more fleet assisted munitions, the Ranger will be better because of its quicker reload and just being able to throw them out on a dime.
Just being able to go, oh, that one missed, I'll have another one next turn.
Yeah. Whereas the Janus is like, oh, well, off for a 4-turn reload, now fire that tube.
Yeah. But yeah, the Janus is a really nice fleet accompaniment, lots of offensive munitions.
General position, it's going to want to run high. So it's really not a ship that works well flying with the fleet, like snuggling up to battle stars.
Yeah.
So it's not gonna work like a Ranger would in that kind of regard. It's definitely gonna run high. So if you bring a Janus, you've got to think about how to protect it from incoming munitions. So you're gonna need Vipers that can defend it, Sweepers that can defend it, or PCMs that can be readily available to defend it as well. Or come to terms with the fact that it is just going to eat all of the munitions and you'll probably get one salvo out of it before it dies.
Yeah, it very much depends on how many assets your opponent's willing to throw at it. Yeah, don't be afraid to let it take a hit.
Yeah.
And like this distance to the Heracles is probably, a pretty good distance until you enter the gun range. Once you're stuck in gun range, move it in, just because guns are going to settle things much faster than munitions. So bring your extra 5 guns.
Personally, with guns and the Janus, I find it a happy accident if a Janus has gone into gun range to help out. Yeah. Or it's the end of the game, the munitions are spent, the fighters are done, and I'm just throwing everything to the board. When I position a Janus, I'm thinking about how can I get that big juicy salvo onto a target, and that's all I care about.
Yeah. So I think, let me double check here, but I think that pretty much covers everything.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. So onto the carriers. Let's start with the pure carrier, the Atlas. Praise be the brick, right?
Praise be the brick.
Because it is a brick. Like, this thing is as durable, without a doubt, as durable as the Battlestars. As we mentioned, the Jupiter 1 is only, somewhat more durable than this thing is. Jupiter 2 obviously decently more durable. But this thing is more durable than the Artemis, more durable than the Minerva, hands down. And gives you more fighters for the points than any other colonial ship in the game. More fighters alone. Like, even without going into the support slot that you get, it gives you more fighters for the points.
It is your cheapest 2-fighter option.
Yep. So, obviously, and it gives you higher evasion than the Colonial Standard is. Colonial Standard is 20. This gives you 35. I want to say only the Cerberus for the Cylons will get higher than this. I think the Cerberus will get to 36.
Comes close, but it doesn't get it.
Oh, it doesn't?
30.
30? Okay. So yeah, this will leave your squadron still able to evade better than any Cylon squadron will, as long as your fighters aren't under a war driver. The only ship with more evasion than this is the Berserk that we'll get to. And this thing has, with the 3 heavy guns and the 2 mediums, it's got as much gunpowder as the Janus. And unlike the Janus, this thing has even more armor. It's really not worth shooting at for your opponent until that's what you have left. So, definitely, if you're bringing one of these, either you're bringing one as just kind of bringing some more fighters along, in which case have it keep up with your fleet as best it can, or you're running a carrier fleet, in which case run away. But once the enemy catches up with you, turn all your Atlas around and mow the enemy down, because you get 6 Atlas and you're running 18 heavy guns and 12 medium guns. That's like that's more than 2 Minotaurs worth of firepower. And hopefully by the time your opponent's caught up to you, your fighters and squadrons have done some work on softening him up. So
yeah, typically
I love
on a lot of
brick.
fleets, unless you're running a very memey fleet, or you're just going absolute squadrons, you'll generally find that Atlas will come about in 1, maybe 2. At a push, you might have 3 of them. But it's usually around the 2 mark that you'll find Atlas get brought along. And the Atlas is the one ship which is slow, but you don't care about leaving it behind.
Yeah.
You want to run a mobile fleet, but it needs to have a ton of fighter coverage, bring Atlas.
Yep.
Bring an Atlas or 2, and then you can bring really mobile ships like the Minerva, the Berserk, the Adamant, the Ranger, and you can have those go along and do the thing, and have those Atlas or 2 provide the extra squadron support where your fleet is lacking.
Yep.
And also, because it hasn't been mentioned at this point, I will bring it up now, how evasion works. It's been mentioned a lot, but no one's actually bothered to explain it. Evasion is a raw percentage for an incoming shot that would have been rolled as a hit, gets re-rolled into a miss. So an Atlas having 35 evasion means that 35% of incoming shots against a squadron under an Atlas is just going to get re-rolled into a miss.
Yep. Which is really nice. So, yeah, the Atlas, honestly, if your enemy wants to try and shoot torpedoes at it, and you don't have flak around, don't worry about it. He's not getting through one of these things quickly. Let him shoot it the left or the right the first turn around, let him shoot the other. They are too slow to really avoid torpedoes. They just simply don't have enough vertical movement to avoid torpedoes at anything except like just the real, across the map sort of shots. Anything else, they're probably going to start taking hits. So, be prepared to accept that. But yeah, if you want to let the enemy shoot at it, or if the enemy's shooting at it, you don't have anything around to protect it, let him. It's very easy to have Rangers run out of munitions before they can kill an Atlas. So
Yeah,
they're very
depending on the
tanky.
munitions you've took, yeah.
Um,
Be very mindful with Atlas, by the way, because standard subsystem distribution on ships is that fire control is usually on top, engineering's normally on bottom, navigation's normally on the rear. That's a fairly standard convention for ships. There's been a few exceptions, like the Minerva having its fire control and engineering swapped. The Atlas is a real oddball. Its fire control is on the right-hand side. I don't know why its fire control is on the right-hand side,
Makes no
but
sense.
it is.
Tech bay's on the left, fire controls on the right.
Be very, very mindful when you are using a Atlas and you're going to commit to a gunfight, because if you start it with your right side pointed towards the enemy, and they cut through your armor, which they will eventually, you're going to start wondering why suddenly your Atlas is not shooting anymore.
Yep. So yep, definitely, for gun engagements, prefer starting on your left. You can switch to your right later once your left is shot out. Or you can try going the other way around so that you can use all of your hull armor once your left gets shot out. But be careful about that right armor getting shot out for the gun engagements. The other thing that's worth mentioning is if you can keep these alive and you've got a squadron that's beat up, they're the only colonial ship that has bonus hangar repair or squadron repair rate on their engineering. So, even if you're at neutral posture, you're sitting at 110%. If you go full defensive, you're at 132%. It sounds like a really small bonus. It adds up big time. These things will repair squadrons significantly faster. Something about the way they have the equation work really makes a difference. So
yeah, because squadron repair is a percentage of the squadron's total hit points every round.
It's total missing hit points. Yeah,
the total missing it repairs. So if it's something like about 60 or 75% or something like that of the missing points per turn, getting an extra, multiplying that by 32%, you get a nice chunk extra out of it. So the Atlas is one of the few colonial ships where you consider actually bringing squadrons back. Though, don't bring squadrons back if it's going to come at a detriment of winning a fight or battle.
Yeah. You never want to do that, but it is nice.
That being said, ideal squadrons for the Atlas, because it has a support slot, it's a prime candidate for just chucking an ARP on there, or a sweeper. Like, any of the support squadrons for the Colonials work.
Yeah, they're all good.
The simple fact. they're all pretty decent for all of the reasons. There's no bad picks per se. There's bad picks for certain fleets. So, bringing a whole bunch of ARPs onto a fleet that's not actually got any support squadrons, and you don't bring any Vipers, that would not be a smart idea.
Yeah.
But the actual squadrons themselves, the Raptors, the ARPs, and the Sweepers, they're all pretty good squadrons for what they do and what they bring. So depending on what your fleet needs, if it needs just recon and it's cheap and it's being cheap on the budget, bring Raptors. You need to bulk up a bit of firepower, you need flanking revenants to just go away, bring ARPs. If you're running like a Janus in your fleet and you don't want to mess around with PCMs or keeping Vipers in AMD due to that kind of thing, bring a sweeper.
Yeah.
The main slots themselves, though, the two fighter slots, you want Mach 2s on that.
Yeah. You can put Taipans if you're running the pure carrier fleet, as we mentioned earlier, but honestly, Viper 2s help you win that fighter battle as quick as possible. And honestly, Viper 2s still do really good damage to enemy capitals. There's not a real good reason to bring something else. Viper 1s, this is probably the biggest time where Viper 1s are not worth it. Because this is one of your squadrons that has extra evasion. If you gotta come down to Viper 1s anywhere, don't make it here.
Because you want your Viper 2s to be living as long as possible, because Viper 2s have a higher damage output than Viper Mark 1s.
The only
In fact,
consolation
they're
if you bought...
the only squadron that gets increased damage on the guns.
Yeah. The only consolation prize to putting Viper 1s in here is because they have 40 hit points. You can use that evasion for longer in that sense. But it's not really worth it. Like, you want the higher speed, will help you avoid damage a lot more than...
Yeah.
I guess maybe not if you're shooting at capitals, because capitals don't have to deal with squadron fighter brawl dynamics, but...
But
yeah,
generally, you want to bring Mark 2s on that.
Mark 2s. Yeah.
Don't bring support squadrons onto primary slots on an Atlas.
No, it's not a good idea.
The idea may come along and say, oh, but it's got extra evasion. So these ARPs, they're going to last longer in a firefight. I might actually get the missiles off. Well,
they still won't last as long as Viper 2s.
If a Raider squadron or a Viper squadron catches an ARP or a Raptor or a Sweeper, it's dead. Even if you put it onto a Berserk, it's dead. It's the difference between it lasting about an extra 2 seconds in a turn.
Yeah.
The squadron's just going to die anyway.
Well, especially because they're so much slower than Viper 2s.
Yeah, but
the ARPs
Viper
especially.
2s,
But
Viper 2s will benefit from the evasion to the point where on Berserks and on Atlas it can change the outcome of a fight.
Yeah.
Simply having those buff squadrons compared to having like Artemis or Jupiter Vipers instead.
Yeah. So that, I think that pretty much covers the Atlas.
Berserk.
I'm just kind of going through, yeah. Berserk. I love this. She's so much fun just because she's so fast. The Berserk is.
Pew 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 pew.
So 650 points gets you a squadron with the best evasion in the game. Like, that's pretty hard to go wrong with. You get 5 medium guns with... Whoops, wrong thing. With extra range. Bonus 10% range. Which is really nice, whether it's, harassing enemy capitals with its high speed and range, or supporting fighter battles, because, that's just about 4 kilometers of range on its close range bracket with 5 medium guns. That will put some hurt onto some squadrons to support the squadron at 50 evasion. So, don't be afraid to have this help with either role. It's one of the fastest Colonial ships. I want to say only the Adamant and Minotaur are faster.
As far as I'm aware, yes.
So it's pretty flexible in terms of how you use it. Obviously you can use its extended range to, in the same way the Minotaur can shoot, over the shoulders of your Battlestars. The Berserk can do the same thing. It has the same bonus range amount. It doesn't have the bonus accuracy. Obviously, it doesn't have as many guns.
Range.
The
Berserk
Minotaur?
actually has... the Berserk actually has the longest gun range in the game.
I could have sworn the Minotaur's the same.
Nope.
Oh, it isn't. Something else has 110. What else was it that had 110?
The Berserk's max gun range
Minerva?
is 6,200.
Okay.
Nothing else goes that far.
Is
Minotaur ends up at 6,000.
Is your guide wrong or my memory flaky? My memory is probably flaky.
You have the ships right in front of you. You can check right now.
Well, I don't have the Minerva in front of me.
I was going to say you can check the Berserk.
Yeah, no, I checked the other two. They're both at 105. The 2 gunships are.
105?
105% at neutral posture range.
Oh, right. But yeah, the Berserk ends up at 6,002.
Yeah.
Makes it the longest range gunship in the game, which, if you're fighting against Colonials, you've got a clean 400 meter range advantage on standard Colonial ships, which makes the Berserk a big pain in the ass. But whereas the Minotaur, it can do an over-the-shoulder play, That's basically the way that you want to run a Berserk, full stop. It is made of paper. If the Berserk takes
Yeah.
return fire,
30
it
left
dies.
and right. Like, it's the same amount of side armor you get on the Minotaur.
Yeah, if you look at a Berserk funny, it explodes.
Yeah. The only consolation prize is it's sitting on 70 hull, unlike a Nemesis or a Minotaur or a Cerastes.
The Manticore's got 60.
Yeah. So, these things are pretty soft. I guess other consolation prize is, your hangar's down on the bottom. That's weird. Your tech bay is on the right.
On the belly.
Tech base on the right, armory's on the left, and you don't really care about either of those. That's your only real consolation prize to this getting shot at is the subsystem that you're losing is not one it was using anyway. Like, by the time this thing... Are you really chasing...
You can do it!
The Minotaur with... Can it? I have a feeling it can only do that until you run out of applique armor from your Celestra, which is now out of bounds, and so it's not going to be able to keep it up. So yeah, Berserk, great for doing flanking rolls. Whether that's a mix of Berserks and Adamants or just Berserks, or great force doing over-the-shoulder shots, helping your main fleet out. Wow, that poor Ranger is still repairing its engineering. Anyway,
yeah, Colonial subsystem repair is bad.
It is. It's quite painful. That's probably why Garfield hates EMP so much, is because of course he only plays Colonials.
Yep. But the Berserk, it's a support gunship, and its primary role is to bring that 50 evasion squadron.
Yeah.
That 50 evasion squadron that it brings is just so good, because Berserk Viper Mark IIs just shred things and are a pain in the ass to kill.
Yep.
Durability-wise, it's got the effective health pool of 2 Viper Mark II squadrons. It's not got the damage output, but it's got the effective health pool. When you take into the probability of the evasion and whatnot. Which
Let the sucker skirt the edge of an engagement range and let it cause havoc with its squadron support with its guns. It's got the speed to stay on the edge.
Yeah, it's got the mobility to keep the range advantage that it has, and it should. If your Berserk is over the ship that's out in front, you've either run out of ships or you're doing it wrong.
Yeah. The only thing to keep in mind, of course, is enemy gunships, since they're just going to charge straight in at you because they all have both top and bottom guns, will be able to cut the corner. They will catch up to you. They all have maybe not as much extended range, but they do have extended range, so it's not like they have to get a whole lot closer to the Berserk than the Berserk does to them to shoot back.
Yeah.
So
Revenants.
Do be careful of enemy gunships, but otherwise, yeah,
Revenants, Arachne, Minotaurs, Heracles. If they start making a gun run for your Berserk, just don't do it. Don't try and take that fight.
That's the point at which you boost with the Berserk and stall for time.
Yeah, unless you're outgunning them 4 ships to 1, you don't do that with the Berserk. The Berserk provides support. It helps. It shoots over the shoulder and it bulks up the amount of guns that you brought to the fight. If it ever puts itself in the position where it's being shot at itself, the Berserk is just gonna die. But if you can keep it safe, if you can keep it over the shoulder, it can provide nice support to your fleet through those 5 extra medium guns, its high speed, and that juicy squadron.
Yep. So that covers the carriers. Let's look at our 2 escorts, starting with the Adamant.
The Adamant, sure.
The Adamant is really the escort's escort too. I love the Adamant. Like, you get a squadron, you get a munition, you get 4 light guns, you get pretty decent armor for the points you're paying for this sucker, decent hull points. Like, there's really nothing to not love about this. I mean, yes, your munition has a lower rate of fire once every 4 turns, but honestly, like, that's not really that bad. Like, if we think about if you were to bring the Artemis only gets 1, whereas if you had 2 adamants, you'd get 2. So that handily makes up for your lower rate of fire. You get Colonial Evasion on your 1 squadron, 20 points. And your 4 light guns aren't bad, but, you know, since they patched them, it's not a terrible amount of damage, especially for supporting squadron battles. Like, whatever you need the adamant to do, it will do it. Whether it's...
It is very much the jack of all trades, the adamant.
More than anything else, this sucker is the jack of all trades.
Yeah.
It's got enough guns, and the munition is a nice support that it will support your main line pretty well. And its armor is pretty heavy relative to its weight. So it does pretty well there. It's got the speed to go for flanking rolls, if that's what you want to do with it. It can really do whatever you need. You're never going to go wrong by bringing another adamant in your fleet.
I could argue that with some fleets, but it's not the worst rule to go by.
Yeah, I mean, Garfield's got his fleet that is just 7 adamants, which even though, you know, he's then down 1,500 points or whatever it is, 800 points, something like that, it's still a pretty solid fleet. Like, you can't just go straight at it. That's 28 light guns. That will tear you up.
Just bear in mind that for the adamant itself, it's got 2 glaring weaknesses, and they're both to do with its guns. One, it has light guns.
Yeah.
They're accurate, they're consistent, and they'll keep putting out damage, but they're light guns.
Yeah, not a lot of
got
damage.
4 of them. It's chipping away at targets. It contributes. It's nice, consistent damage, but it's not going to start smashing things to pieces anytime soon.
Not on its own.
It leans heavily on its munition slot to get the job done if it wants to engage capitals by itself. But the adamant shouldn't be engaging things by itself.
Yeah,
the
it should always be running with something.
Other things.
Even if it's more adamants.
Yeah. Like, the thing that works really nice alongside
or adamants is 16 light guns. Or, yeah, you know, my tournament fleet is 2 adamants and 2 berserks. That's
like
18 guns. That's scary.
A nice amount of damage, and you've got 2 munition slots there. That's a really nice little flanking element to go about with, especially if you bought PCMs, because the berserk makes up for the thing that the adamant doesn't have, and that's raw firepower in its guns.
Yeah. Has an extra gun in their mediums instead of lights compared to the adamant.
And the other glaring weakness that's related to the guns is that it has nothing above and below it, front and behind. It is purely a broadside ship.
Yeah.
Which this also goes for the berserk. It goes a bit less for the berserk, because the berserk just wants to stay the hell away from things, so it usually chooses how it's going to fight. The adamant gets a little bit more involved. And you have to be mindful of the fact that if something approaches from above or below, the adamant is going to struggle to deal with it.
Yeah. The only real consolation prize on that, of course, is the adamant is really maneuverable. It can handily, climb and dive enough to keep targets from getting directly below it. There's not much that can actually get below the adamant.
Yeah, the only ships that are doing that are things like the Nemesis and the Cerastes.
Yeah. And even the
sort of
I
stuff
feel like
where you don't have to worry about it too much.
Well, and the Cerastes has no top or bottom guns either. So if you can't shoot at the Cerastes, it can't shoot at you, unless it's playing its range advantage. But that has nothing to do with the vertical The
That being said,
vertical climb and dash.
if you get into a gunfight with a SgtZdog with an adamant, there's a fair odds that the SgtZdog is actually going to win that.
Yes, especially if he. I wonder if the SgtZdog is
If
better off at
the
long
SgtZdog
or
uses
short
its-
range.
If,
Because PDCs are penalized by range pretty badly.
Right, but they are ridiculously accurate against capital-sized targets.
Yeah. But yeah, so that's the Adamant. It's pretty good.
Also,
the other thing that's worth mentioning is both broadsides are your engineering subsystem.
Oh yeah, so
and
once your armor goes...
Once your armor
Yeah.
goes, this sucker will go. To forestall how long this thing takes to die, when you turn to present your other broadside, turn away from the enemy. You only have 30 front armor, whereas you have 60 rear armor. And the light guns definitely prefer a longer range engagement anyway, so turn away from the enemy when you switch sides. Don't turn into the enemy. This is not a Battlestar where you want to turn in. This is something that wants to turn away.
And the Adamant does have the mobility to turn away from things and get to safety.
Yes.
Whereas a Battlestar typically does not.
Yes. So, I think that's pretty much everything I have to cover regarding...
Also its munition slot. Anything goes on a Adamant's munition slot. Like, literally, anything goes.
There's not a bad option there.
If you're running the Adamant as part of a split-off force, you may want to bring APs on it. If you want an offensive loadout, AP missiles are nice, because it helps to make up for the fact that it's going to struggle getting through armor. If you're bringing it to support an element that's got decent gunpowder, like Berserks or Rangers are present, PCMs are a nice touch.
Yeah.
You generally won't want to go for stuff like debris mines, because odds are your fighter wing is doing what it's doing, and that sort of thing's just better for Battlestars to carry.
Yeah. I've probably run every munition other than maybe proximity mines in an Adamant. Just because, like, okay, it lacks, it's the one disadvantage of two Adamants versus an Artemis is you have no missile defense. So PCMs work great. AP missiles, great for AP missiles, guided missiles, torpedoes. All good for helping compensate for the fact that you only have 4 light guns. Debris mines work nicely if you don't have squadron superiority. EMP mines, nice. Just, those go pretty well most any place you can put them. Especially because, of course, EMP mines are best at neutering gun fleets, which it's pretty easy to outgun the Adamant.
With the speed of the Adamant, the EMP generator is actually an interesting pick
And
for it.
that was actually going to be the next thing I said is, if you are careful to not let it be only its front armor that takes hit, charging in with an Adamant with an EMP generator is not terrible. It's not too expensive. You can launch your squadron already. The only real downside to it, of course, is the reload time on that EMP generator is not quick. But an EMP generator is also, 8 points of subsystem damage. It's pretty chunky subsystem damage.
Remember that the Adamant has got a long reload time on its munition slot, whatever you put in there.
Yeah. But really, anything goes for its munition slot. You will not complain about any munition slot that you have in there.
Also, in the previous video, we did talk about the idea that recon is king, and knowing what the enemy doing is absolutely vital. Now, if you don't bring a Manticore, which we'll be going on to shortly, the Adamant is not the worst choice in the world for backup recon. It's got the standard 5k radius range, and it can boost up to 6k, and it's a pretty quick ship. It's not the most efficient at it in the world, but if you use the Adamant in such a way, you can make a passable recon piece out of it if you are desperate. and you are just bringing a single Adamant along. Bonus points if you put an EMP generator on it, because you're using it as recon. That'll be one of the times when it's away from the fleet.
Yeah. All right. Manticore.
Manticore.
So I talked about this a little bit earlier. Is that just like a random bit of debris next to your, below your Manticore? There is like a random bit of debris below your Manticore. I don't know if you see that. Oh,
Let's see which.
oh, it's adamant wreckage, but without the adamant. Like I can mouse over it, and it says adamant wreckage, but there's no adamant there. I wonder.
I can see that as well. Hold on.
Oh, I see the adamant model. It's closer to my fleet. Don't mind me while I get distracted by the fact that the wreckage has moved. You can see that too? I wonder if that's a bug on this map.
That's interesting.
Interesting.
Anyway,
Manticore. So, mention this briefly. The Manticore is really kind of important for scouting because all of your size 4 ships, as well as the Janus, have reduced radius range. The Manticore is the only colonial ship which has extended radius range. Now, even with that extended radius range on a full defensive, is only going to hit 7,200 meters.
it is specifically 7,080 meters.
7,080. So,
which is a nice big profile, but the Nemesis has an excess of 10,000 meters.
yeah.
So, whereas a Nemesis can just move forward on full speed one turn and then flip the switch and you've got eyes on, the Manticore needs to get a little more involved. However, as the Colonials, the Manticore is your single best option for a recon piece.
Yeah.
And it's a lot more durable than the Nemesis, so odds are, even if it's going to die from the incoming fire that it's going to take, it's got the durability to last long enough to ID all the targets.
Yeah. Yours is also appropriately named Odin, I notice.
Praise be the random names.
So, after you've scouted with this thing, what do you do with it? Because that's really its own discussion. It's good at harassing other scouts, obviously. It's Corvette cannon. My Berserk survived ramming the Atlas.
Smooth.
Oh, did you really? Oh, that was rude.
Yep. Snipe.
Alright, fine. Be that way. Now I have to kill that.
You finished talking about it? It was a legitimate battlefield target. And now there's going to be a lot of Viper launches.
So you remember spin to win? That's what my Berserk is going to be doing this turn. It's going to be doing... No, I'm going to see if I can pull it.
Movement.
Yep, it's going to be doing a full 180. I'm going to be see if I can do this with just all the medium guns I have over there. Because I do have a lot. Anyway. Back to talking about the...
Yeah, once you've...
Manticore.
So, the main thing that a Manticore is going to do in multiplayer is you're going to bring one of them, and you're going to use it to ID an enemy the enemy fleet. Once it's done that, if you ID every capital ship in the enemy fleet, the Manticore, and by extension the Nemesis, has paid for itself. That knowledge is so important. Because if you're running a fleet that's full of Artemis, and you recon the enemy fleet and it turns out he's got nothing that can dive faster than you, you can stop diving now. And you can start getting more interesting with your positioning. You find out they've got Argos, you realise, oh great, I've got to start lifting this fleet up, I can't dive no more. That knowledge it's priceless on informing how you're going to use the rest of your fleet. So if your Manticore pulls that off, it's already paid for itself.
Yeah.
But that being said, once you have done that, there are still things that the Manticore can do. A lot of it depends upon the munition that you bring on the Manticore. If you bring a support munition, a utility like the PCM or the debris mine, it can come back and merge in with the fleet and it can assist. If you bring one of the more offensive focus, like guided missiles, AP missiles, or torpedoes, it can provide harassment and find an interesting arc to try and disable a subsystem of a target. If you get behind Battlestar with a Manticore and you've got AP missiles, you can start considering sniping out the navigation from behind it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And it's got the mobility to do these fancy little things, assuming the Manticore does not explode promptly after it's ID'd the enemy fleet.
yeah, because unfortunately it is close enough that pretty good odds it's going to get ID'd itself. Whether that's by a Nemesis or the various other Cylon ships with good radius range, or by enemy squadrons. Something is probably going to ID the Manticore, which makes it subject to missile fire, and it's just not a whole lot of durability to play with. You got 60 front and top, but everywhere else is pretty soft. Its Corvette cannon pretty good at harassing Nemesis, Hydra, Gorgon. They'll all outrun it, but you can still use that to keep them away from your fleet.
For what it's worth, a Nemesis will wholesale outgun. Well, a Manticore will wholesale outgun a Nemesis.
Yep.
The Nemesis nose gun is trash.
Yeah. The single light
actually...
gun is more a comedy show than an effective tool of war.
Yeah, I was playing around with hacking during some of my personal testing, and I was doing a Nemesis against a Manticore.
Uh-huh.
The Nemesis was averaging out with full accuracy and closing into its closest range bracket. The
Nemesis should only have one range bracket.
Yeah, I think it's just the one range bracket, but I was still closing anyway, out of principle.
Sure.
It was averaging somewhere between 6 to 8 damage per round.
Against what ship?
Against a Manticore.
Oof.
Now, you imagine that there's 60 hull there, and then there's the excess of 30 armor in each slot, and I was running cluster missiles on it, because I wanted to play around with them and see if I was missing something important on them.
Sadly, I'm sure
I was
you weren't.
talking in excess of, like, about 10 to 15 turns to kill a Manticore with a Nemesis. Now, if you put a Manticore against a Nemesis and you have the Manticore doing work, the Manticore is not going to take that, because it's basically got a medium gun with a rate of fire of a light gun and the accuracy to boot. That Corvette cannon that it's got on its nose, and it's a class of its own, it's not a medium gun, it's a Corvette gun.
Yep.
Yes,
The most unique gun in the game.
It's a nasty piece of work, and it's a good thing that it only gets one of them.
Oh yeah. So it's 1 damage, if I recall, which would be medium gun, but its rate of fire is more like that of a light gun.
Well, actually, according to this, the rate of fire is higher.
Higher than a light gun?
Because it's got light turret on the back, which has got a fire rate of high. The front Corvette cannon's got a fire rate of very high.
Oh, nice. So somewhere between a light and a PDC then.
Yeah.
I think it's closer to the light than the PDC,
and,
but yeah.
And it's spitting this out at medium gun damage.
Yeah. So it's somewhere along the lines of having probably, and I think it's more accurate than a medium gun. I don't remember. What's your accuracy showing?
The accuracy did actually come down on it a bit when the latest patch came that extended turns. Yeah, so all of the guns had a bit of a rejig to account for the turn changes, because gunfire stopped for 2 seconds between turns. That's why turn length was 12 seconds and not 10. And then eventually they managed to sort it out so the guns fire constantly for the full 12 seconds. And because of that, they had to do a big rejig of the guns with their fire rate and their accuracy and stuff. And the Corvette cannon's accuracy actually came down a bit, so it's an accuracy medium on full offensive posture instead of high.
So it's the same accuracy then, more or less, as what you get on a Berserker.
It's a high rate of fire, and it's still more accurate than the Berserk.
Is it? Okay.
Well, it's still more accurate than any other medium gun, as far as I've observed so far.
Yeah.
Because bear in mind that these like medium, very high, them abstract turns.
Yeah.
And they're also base modifiers, and the Corvette's cannon's probably got different modifiers against different size targets, and going into infinity.
Yeah.
But it's still a really, really reliable gun.
Yes.
Whereas the Nemesis, which is a scouting equivalent for the Cylons, once it's done, the only things it can do now is play with its munitions, and it can hack. Its gun is there so it can have a participation award at the end of the match.
Yeah. I know I've had it I know I've had a Nemesis supporting fighter battles and whatnot, but that's mostly because what else are you gonna do with it? Or I didn't really need it to do anything else at that point in the battle. Whereas the Minotaur, its Corvette gun can help harass lighter targets. The munition, you can use it either for supporting your fleet or putting munitions from angles that are awkward for your opponent to defend. It's got the speed to be wherever you need it to be on a map.
Yeah, the Manticore is very, very nice for the concept of forcing a reaction.
Yeah.
Forcing your opponent to do something about it. Where, in fact, it is the only colonial ship where mounting a nuke is actually an interesting idea.
Yes.
Because colonial nukes are generally just bad. Than 250 points. The amount of damage that you actually get for the hard point is lower than actually just bringing a stack of any other munition. And it's
it's 160, whereas guided missiles are 120.
For most of the munitions.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what they are for all the others. But I just compare them. Let's see, what do you get? 40 torpedoes? So that's 160 damage on
50
a torpedo?
torpedoes.
50 torpedoes? So yeah. So you're getting 200 damage on a torpedo stack.
And torpedoes have better odds of hitting than a bloody nuke.
Yeah, because the nuke's probably going to get intercepted.
Yeah, people see a nuke and the panic, which brings me to the point where the Manticore is the one interesting ship for doing that. Because you can induce panic with that nuke. In fact, if you don't actually fire the nuke on a Manticore, it is doing more than if you actually fire it.
Yeah.
The threat of the constant presence,
especially if you can keep it close enough,
being dropped on you from an annoying angle, means that they constantly have to have something ready to deal with it.
Yeah.
Something ready to intercept that at the moment that it's finally going to launch. Even if you never launch that nuke throughout the entire match, as long as you put that Manticore into a threatening position after you've done your recon, it can basically psych out your opponent into doing something dumb.
Force the enemy to keep his berserks close enough to his battle stars that the flak is there, or hold a fighter back, or
Yeah, you can force repositions, which the rest of your fleet can take advantage of, even if you never flip the switch on that nuke. And that's a really, really powerful thing. But that being said, you can also do the same thing with an EMP generator for less than half the cost.
Yeah.
And that recharges.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that pretty much covers it.
Oh, yeah, and the Celestra exists.
Yes.
Good talk.
The Celestra, which we're gonna... Your Celestra has decided to quit the battlefield, I noticed.
I wanted to try and get it to the red line, because I've never actually taken a ship to the red line, and I'm kind of curious as to what happens.
Oh, they just lose ability to do anything. It might also kill all the subsystems. I don't remember.
Huh.
We can let it go, and you can see, because I don't remember. So yeah,
right. Another 13 turns.
Celestra. Obviously,
really, I can honestly just say it exists and then stop talking.
Yeah, competitive fleets should not bring one, but for the sake of completion, if you do,
sure.
You can use its 2
what
munition slots to either provide reloads to something like a Ranger, which, as we mentioned earlier, can go through its munitions pretty quick, or you can use it to provide flexibility. So maybe you start with debris mines, but then you discover that your enemy doesn't have any fighters hardly to speak of, but he has lots of gunships, so you swap to the EMP mines that you brought along on your Celestra. It's good for that. If you do bring one, you probably shouldn't bring it with a gun fleet first thing. And the reason is because the way to get the most bang for your buck out of a Celestra is keep a given ship alive as long as possible. Run away, make the enemy kind of trickle into you one at a time. Stay at the long range where guns aren't as effective so that you can keep reapplying that armor buff. And that's going to be the way to really get the most out of the Celestra. It doesn't have posture, so at least you don't have to worry about losing maneuverability with it. And it does mean that its straightest range will always be available. I don't think there's really a whole lot else we can add in, though. Like, use it to bring reloads or flexibility in your munitions. Run away with your ships so that you can keep applying armor for as long as possible.
Like, okay.
Don't let it get shot at. It has even less armor than the Berserk.
Yeah, but honestly, as a serious thing where we're trying to encourage better habits out of people and to think about the things that they bring and what they do and how to use them.
Don't bring one.
Don't bring the Celestra. Just it's the point costs that you got there. Bring a Manticore.
I will give it this.
Find out what your enemy's doing. Or use the points, literally use the entire points worth of the Celestra for fleet-wide upgrades to munitions and squadrons.
Yeah. The only real pro I can say about the Celestra is it's more useful than the Hydra. We'll go into the Hydra next time, but...
The Hydra is...
Yeah. Yeah, competitive play, don't bring this.
I can think of like some interesting meme fleets where the Hydra kinda works. And like, I suppose you can bring a Celestra with standard munitions if you want to be that guy who brings a nuke and you want to swap out after you've fired it. But then my argument to that is, why the hell did you bring a nuke on anything but a Manticore and try
and why did you decide that you should spend more than 250 points on nukes?
Right, yeah.
So the Celestra's 550, 600 points?
The armor increase that you get from a Celestra, applying that through plating, is so insignificant. Like, 20 extra points of armor. I mean, against anything that's less than 800 points, I guess it'll do something.
Well,
anything bigger than that, and that 20 points is just gonna... It's just gonna evaporate.
So, an Artemis shooting an Artemis at extreme range, the one with the Celestra will win. And surprisingly well. Because Battlestar Artillery at long range is just really inaccurate. But...
That fight actually just completely comes down to RNGesus because of how scattery the accuracy is. The guy that doesn't have the Celestra plating could still win because the dice gods have decided, you know what? We're going to have you hit more of your shots.
He could, but like I've gone against somebody who's brought Celestras, and if you can keep the ship that's getting buffed by the Celestra, out far away enough, it can be okay. But please don't bring Celestras to competitive fleets. Bring them once in a while if you want to just change things up in a more casual fight, but not to a competitive.
Doing a serious engagement, it's not gonna help you.
Yeah. So yeah, that wraps us up, folks. That's every Colonial ship. We talked about munitions and squadrons a decent bit. I'm not going to have a whole session where I talk about those, just because it's honestly not worthwhile. Like, Viper 2 is going to be better than Viper 1. So there's really no discussion to have there. What else could we talk about? We talked about Taipans some. Bring them if you want, but really, it's more important to win the fighter battle than it is to have some extra strike capability. Support squadrons, colonials, really, they're all options. None of them are going to do poorly for you. So, yeah, munitions, we talked about those. I really don't need to go into any great detail about them. The only ones that would really warrant any discussion would be like EMP generator and nukes, which we talked about plenty. Crunch, crunch, crunch.
Poor damned.
Yes, sir.
Never stood a chance.
It didn't.
Come on, Celeste. You can make it to the edge.
Yeah, I was over.
Curiosity intensifies.
So while we wait for the poor Celestia to get to the edge of the map and become stuck, which, by the way, I think the very first time this ever happened to me was when, during the beta, when the broken EMP generators, you remember?
Oh god.
And the map fell out from under me. I think is the very first time I ever had that happen. Anyway, so
just for a quick reference point, by the way, on the Manticore's gun. Check the amount of damage that I've done to the rear of your Janus in one turn from max range, half-arsedly, and the rate of fire of the actual gun itself. You can see the shots.
24 points in one turn. That's pretty solid.
And you can see just from the distance between those shells that are still in midair the stupid rate of fire that the Manticore gun has, and that's a medium cannon.
Shoot. And I'm looking at that that looks like it's higher rate of fire than any single given PDC.
It is just blapping away like an absolute madman.
Because of course PDCs, we only ever see them, a whole bunch all together.
Incoming.
Ooh, Nelly, that's some fire.
Yeah, it is.
Front armor, save me. Is the Celestia there? Almost.
Nope, not yet.
Almost.
Target is 3-4 by 6-2.
Crunch.
Almost. The inner Garfield was channeled, but not enough.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you all for joining us. This has been our second tutorial session for Battlestar Galactica Deadlock. My name is SgtZdog. This has been our guest here has been Sir Wagglepuss III, winner of the last two Battlestar Galactica Deadlock tournaments.